What if the past was more advanced than we dare to believe? Buried beneath the mist-shrouded mountains of China and etched into the crumbling walls of forgotten temples lie secrets that defy the very laws of nature as we know them. Ancient mechanisms that move without modern power, tombs sealed tighter than science can unlock, and celestial knowledge inscribed thousands of years before telescopes ever existed. Who built these wonders, and how? From the unexplainable precision of the Sanxingdui bronzework to the magnetic anomalies beneath the pyramids of Xinjiang, these are not mere relics of history. They are riddles. Riddles that challenge everything we assume about ancient civilization, technology, and the limits of human knowledge. As archaeologists scratch the surface and scientists run out of answers, one truth becomes clear. Some mysteries refuse to be buried. So sit back, relax, and let's dive deep into the shadows of time, where forgotten dynasties whisper through stone, and the unknown waits to be uncovered. It begins with water. Still and gray beneath the overcast skies of Jiangxi province, Poyang Lake stretches wide like a vast forgotten mirror. Its mood shifts with the wind, sometimes tranquil, sometimes violently churning, and for centuries, locals have whispered that what lies beneath its surface is far more unsettling than the waters above. Poyang Lake is China's largest freshwater lake, when it chooses to be. It breathes with the seasons, swelling to thousands of square kilometers during the wet months and retreating dramatically in the dry. This natural rhythm has revealed many secrets over the centuries, but one discovery continues to puzzle archaeologists and historians alike. A lost city, submerged beneath the waves. A city that, to this day, has no definitive name, no recorded fall, and no agreed-upon origin. In 2001, Chinese divers exploring the lake bed made a startling discovery. Massive stone structures, roads paved with cut flagstones, archways, and what appeared to be staircases, nearly perfectly preserved beneath years of silt and sediment. At a depth of roughly 5 to 10 meters, the ruins seemed to belong to an ancient, organized settlement. The layout was intentional, the craftsmanship intricate. But there was no mention of such a city in local annals. Could this be the legendary city of Xinjiang? Some scholars believe so. Once a thriving trading port along the Gan River, Xinjiang was known during the Han Dynasty and flourished for centuries. But even detailed historical records from the Tang and Song dynasties make no mention of its dramatic submersion or disappearance. If this is Xinjiang, why was its fate left unrecorded? Others propose a different narrative, one that reaches even further back in time. Some of the stone carvings found beneath the lake display motifs and construction techniques not seen since the Warring States period, and in some cases, possibly earlier. If that's true, the settlement could predate the Han Dynasty by centuries. But if it was so old, how did it survive so long without collapse? How did it end up at the bottom of a lake that didn't exist in its current form until much later? Geologists offer one explanation. They suggest the ancient city may have been abandoned and eventually consumed by natural shifts in the region's topography. Poyang Lake, after all, was not always as expansive as it is today. Over time, sediment from the Yangtze River and seasonal flooding could have gradually engulfed low-lying settlements. But other theories tread beyond the boundaries of mainstream science. Poyang Lake is often referred to as China's Bermuda Triangle. Ships have vanished here without a trace. In 1945, a Japanese transport vessel carrying over 200 sailors reportedly disappeared in calm conditions. No wreckage was ever found. Since the early 20th century, more than 200 ships are said to have met mysterious ends in these waters. Magnetic anomalies, sudden whirlpools, inexplicable fogs. Locals speak of the lake as a place where time and reason falter. Is there a connection between these stories and the city beneath? One fringe theory speculates that the settlement was destroyed not by water, but by something from above. A meteor strike, perhaps, or an atmospheric event powerful enough to shift the landscape. Another theory, often dismissed but never entirely silenced, suggests the city was abandoned deliberately, in haste, as if the people had foreseen or feared something approaching. The lake's eerily symmetrical sinkholes and uneven stone platforms have even led some to draw comparisons with megalithic structures found thousands of kilometers away. And yet, despite modern sonar, satellite mapping, and numerous dives, no conclusive timeline has been established for the city's construction, nor any confirmed name etched in the stone. Intriguingly, oral traditions passed down among older fishing families in the region tell of a great city swallowed in silence, its bells still said to ring from beneath the water on cold, quiet mornings. Folklore? Perhaps. But many of these tales describe architectural details now confirmed by divers: arched corridors, towering columns, and massive doors that remain eerily intact despite centuries underwater. Is it possible the city's disappearance was intentionally erased from history? In a country with thousands of years of dynastic rise and fall, entire chapters of history have been lost, whether by conquest, suppression, or disaster. If the city beneath Poyang Lake was connected to a politically disgraced figure, or built by a forgotten tribe, it may have been omitted from state-sanctioned records entirely. The mystery deepens when considering that many of the stones appear to bear symbols unlike standard Chinese script, resembling instead the enigmatic pictograms found in certain pre-Han ceremonial sites. Yet we still know so little. Who were the people who lived here? What did they build, and why? And perhaps most pressing of all, why did they leave? Today, much of the lake's shifting bed remains unexplored. The silt is dense, the currents treacherous. Underwater visibility is poor, and with new environmental concerns and unpredictable seasonal flooding, exploration has slowed in recent years. Still, the city waits in the silence below, its stone halls empty, its streets untraveled, preserved not by memory, but by water. Could answers lie just beneath the next layer of silt? Or is this one of those rare places where the earth holds its secrets too tightly to ever be revealed? The mystery remains, and so does the wonder. As we leave behind the still waters of Poyang Lake, another mystery awaits, this time far to the west, beyond the lush heartland of China and into the dry, windswept silence of the Tarim Basin. Here, in the far reaches of Xinjiang, the landscape is harsh and unforgiving. The Taklamakan Desert, one of the largest sandy deserts in the world, is a place where few dare to venture. The name itself, in some local dialects, is said to mean, "Go in and you'll never come out." Shifting dunes stretch for hundreds of miles, swallowing anything left unguarded. And yet, in this desolate place, something extraordinary has emerged from the sands. A face, not carved in stone, not drawn in ink, but a real human face. Delicately preserved, pale skin, high cheekbones, and long, vivid red hair, still intact after more than 3,000 years. These are the Tarim mummies, some of the most enigmatic and controversial archaeological discoveries in all of China. Over the last century, dozens of these bodies have been unearthed from shallow desert graves. The most famous among them is the beauty of Lulan, a woman who lived around 1800 BC. Her body is remarkably well preserved. Her eyelashes, even the lines in her hands, remain clearly visible. But it is not just the state of preservation that makes these mummies so mysterious. It is who they appear to have been. Unlike traditional depictions of ancient Chinese peoples, Many of the Tarim Basin mummies exhibit Caucasoid features, tall stature, narrow noses, and, most curiously, hair ranging from auburn to bright red. Some have been found with woven wool clothing, tartan-like patterns, and felt hats strikingly similar to those worn by early Indo-European cultures of the West. One child, wrapped in a finely crafted woolen blanket, appears to have been buried with a symbolic plague mask of felt, centuries before such ideas were recorded elsewhere. How did these people get here? And who were they? The earliest remains date back to at least 2000 BC, and possibly earlier. At that time, the Tarim Basin was a crossroads of ancient trade routes, precursors to what would later become the Silk Road. Yet mainstream historical accounts long held that Western peoples did not reach this part of Asia until centuries later. The presence of these mummies challenges that narrative. In the 1990s, genetic testing began to offer some answers. Analysis revealed that the remains carried markers from both Western Eurasian and East Asian populations. This has led many researchers to suggest that the early inhabitants of the Tarim Basin were likely part of a migratory wave of Indo-European speakers, perhaps related to the Tocharians, a little-known group whose language has been linked surprisingly to early Celtic and Germanic roots. But the mystery only deepens from there. No written records remain from these early people. We know them only through what they left behind: burial goods, textiles, and their own bodies. And those artifacts raise questions science hasn't fully answered. Some burial sites include intricate wooden coffins shaped like boats, even though there are no large bodies of water nearby. Others contain strange symbols carved into stone and bone, glyphs that don't match known writing systems from the region. One fringe theory posits that the red-haired mummies may have been part of an early pre-dynastic cultural bridge, a group that migrated east from the steppes of Central Europe, bringing with them agricultural knowledge, textile techniques, and possibly spiritual beliefs. Their arrival, some suggest, may have influenced the rise of early Chinese civilizations in subtle, unrecorded ways. Others go further still. Some theorists point to the striking similarities between the textiles found in Tarim Basin graves and those of Bronze Age European cultures. Could these be remnants of a much earlier forgotten branch of Indo-European civilization, one that reached deeper into Asia than once thought? And if so, why did they vanish? There is no evidence of mass war or violent conquest at these sites. The bodies were often carefully interred, surrounded by items of apparent personal or cultural significance. Their disappearance seems slow, not sudden, absorbed perhaps into the cultures that came after them. Yet no written language, no cities, no monuments remain. Curiously, Chinese historical records dating back to the Han Dynasty mention tall, light-skinned people living beyond the western borders, described as having deep-set eyes, different customs, and speaking foreign tongues. Were these the descendants of the red-haired dead, or merely travelers passing through? Even today, the subject remains sensitive. For decades, access to many of the mummies and their burial sites was restricted. The ethnic history of Xinjiang is complex, and the presence of ancient bodies that seem to originate far from China's central heartland continues to stir political and academic debate. Some worry that these findings are used to support modern agendas. Others argue that the past should be understood, not weaponized. Still, the desert holds its secrets. The mummies rest in state, undisturbed in the dimly lit halls of museums, or still buried beneath sand and time. Their eyes are closed. Their mouths do not speak. But the questions they pose remain as vivid as the color of their preserved hair. Who were these people who defied the desert? What lives did they live? So far from what we thought was their world. And how much more lies hidden beneath the sand, waiting for the right moment to rise again into the light? The mystery continues, As the desert winds of Xinjiang fade behind us, carrying with them the whispers of red-haired mummies and forgotten migrations, we move east, to the lush river valleys of Sichuan province, where another ancient enigma waits to be unearthed. Buried in the soil outside the modern city of Guanghan lies a site that has both astounded and confounded archaeologists since its discovery in the 1980s. A place where time seems to have paused, and artistry bends the rules of culture, belief, and perhaps even reason. This is Sanxingdui. Here, under layers of earth undisturbed for over 3 millennia, workers once digging for clay struck something unexpected. A pit filled not with bones or tools, but with bronze masks, unlike anything found elsewhere in Chinese history. Their expressions are unblinking, stoic, inhuman. The most famous among them stares forward with exaggerated features, a wide mouth, elongated ears, and most remarkably, eyes that protrude dramatically from the face, reaching outward as if seeking something far beyond the visible world. Some masks measure over 1 meter in width, suggesting they were never worn by humans. Others appear ceremonial, mounted on wooden poles or displayed in rituals now lost to time. They are unlike the elegant bronzes of the Shang Dynasty, which ruled China during the same era, around 1200 BC. These masks come from a different vision of the world entirely, a different people, a different mindset. Who made them, and what were they trying to see? The Sanxingdui site is believed to have been part of the ancient Shu civilization, long considered semi-mythical until these discoveries confirmed its reality. The Shu left behind no written language, no scrolls, no tablets, no inscriptions. Their story, as far as we know it, is told through what they left behind in silence. And what they left is astonishing. Alongside the masks were hundreds of artifacts, gigantic bronze trees, human figures standing over 8 feet tall, jade blades, gold scepters, and mythical creatures unlike any described in Chinese lore. The craftsmanship is both advanced and deeply symbolic. Bronze casting techniques found here were so sophisticated, they rival and, in some cases, surpass those of the Shang, despite showing no direct influence from that dominant culture. How could such a complex and unique civilization have existed parallel to the Shang, and yet remained almost entirely unknown to recorded history? That question has puzzled scholars for decades. Mainstream archaeology suggests that the Sanxingdui culture developed in relative isolation, perhaps due to the natural barriers formed by Sichuan's surrounding mountains and river systems. But even in isolation, their symbolic choices are difficult to explain. The large, staring eyes, found not only on masks but also on statues and animal figures, suggest a recurring motif: vision, perception, otherworldliness. Some researchers propose that these features indicate shamanic practices, that the Sanxingdui people believed their leaders or ritualists could see beyond the physical realm into the world of spirits or ancestors. Others suggest the masks were part of an elaborate mythology, now completely lost, perhaps involving deities or beings capable of transcending human limitations. Still others ask a more provocative question. Were the people of Sanxingdui depicting what they saw, or what they believed they saw? The protruding eyes, in particular, have sparked countless theories. Some see them as stylized exaggerations, artistic symbols of heightened awareness or divine sight. But a few fringe theorists have gone further, proposing that these figures might represent beings not entirely human. Visitors, perhaps. Watchers, not gods in the spiritual sense, but something else entirely. These ideas remain speculative and controversial, but their persistence is telling. For a civilization with no writing system, no surviving oral tradition, and no clear cultural descendants, the masks speak louder than words. They challenge assumptions about the scope of early Chinese civilization and about how many of its stories have yet to be told. Adding to the mystery is the sudden disappearance of the Sanxingdui culture. Around 1000 BC, the site was abandoned. There is no evidence of war, no signs of invasion, yet the great bronze works were broken, carefully buried in ritual pits and left behind. Some theorists suggest natural disaster. Perhaps a massive earthquake or the rerouting of a river forced the people to migrate. But why bury their most sacred and elaborate works? Why destroy them with such intention? A second site, Jinsha, discovered in 2001 not far from Sanxingdui, may provide some clues. There, similar artifacts have been found, though on a smaller scale, suggesting the people may have relocated rather than vanished. Yet even at Jinsha, the mystery deepens. The iconography continues. The wide eyes return. What were they looking for? Or what were they hiding from? Today, the Sanxingdui Museum displays many of the artifacts behind glass. Visitors stare into the faces of a civilization that seems both alien and eerily familiar. Artists, engineers, philosophers, whoever these people were, they understood the power of symbols, the weight of myth, and perhaps the fear of being forgotten. And still, their voices remain silent. No one knows their names, no one knows their gods, and no one can say for sure what truths they shaped into bronze with such skill and care. Are the Sanxingdui masks a glimpse into a forgotten cosmology? A sacred vision preserved in metal? Or are they a warning? An echo from a culture that saw too much and paid the price for what it revealed? The questions remain, waiting in the still earth beneath Sichuan, where time has not yet given up its secrets. As the gaze of the Sanxingdui masks fades into the shadows of ancient Sichuan, our journey moves northward, toward the heart of Hebei province. The mountains flatten into rolling plains, and the landscape grows quiet again. But here, beneath the soil and scattered across windswept hills near the city of Shijiazhuang, lie marks far older than memory. Carved not into bronze, but into the enduring bones of the earth itself. They are known simply as the Shijiazhuang stone inscriptions, a name that belies the depth of their mystery. At first glance, these markings might be mistaken for natural striations, faint lines scored into stone by time and weather. But upon closer inspection, patterns emerge. Geometric shapes, angular strokes, long sweeping lines. The characters appear deliberate, arranged, as if someone, or something, was trying to communicate across centuries, in a language that defies interpretation. The most famous of these inscriptions were discovered in the early 2000s, carved deep into prehistoric rock faces and underground caverns that had remained sealed for thousands of years. Some were found embedded within strata believed to date back more than 100,000 years, long before the advent of any known writing system. And yet, they appear written. How can this be? Conventional archaeology places the earliest evidence of written language in China around 1200 BC, with the emergence of oracle bone script during the Shang Dynasty. These were early Chinese characters, symbolic, stylized, but clearly linguistic. The Shijiazhuang inscriptions, however, appear to predate this by tens of thousands of years, if not more. Skeptics argue that the markings are simply natural formations, perhaps the result of mineral erosion, tectonic shifts, or early tool marks made by hominids without symbolic intention. And yet, several of the stones display what seem to be repeating symbols, forms that recur across different sites, often in vertical or horizontal alignment, arranged with a precision that nature rarely mimics. Even more compelling are the reports that some symbols bear resemblance to ancient Chinese characters, and others echo glyphs found in early Sumerian and Indus Valley scripts, civilizations separated by immense distance and time. Could this be a case of pareidolia, our minds projecting meaning onto chaos? Or is it evidence of a forgotten cultural ancestor, a root system of writing that once spread across vast prehistoric territories, only to be lost in time? Mainstream scholars remain cautious. Carbon dating of the surrounding materials has yielded dates ranging from 10,000 BC to over 100,000 BC, but critics argue that this doesn't conclusively date the carvings themselves. Without organic material embedded in the inscriptions, their age remains speculative. Still, if even the most conservative estimates are accurate, these markings would still predate known script by millennia. Adding to the mystery are several unusual anomalies associated with the stones. Some of the inscriptions are found in locations that would have been nearly inaccessible to early humans without climbing or digging equipment. Others appear carved into surfaces now buried beneath hardened layers of mineral deposits, suggesting the carvings predate the buildup of sediment, which would have taken tens of thousands of years to accumulate. Even more strangely, magnetic readings in certain areas of the site show subtle but consistent anomalies, small deviations in the local geomagnetic field. Could this be coincidence? Or might these symbols have been created with an understanding of energies or alignments now lost to us? Local legends add yet another layer of intrigue. In nearby villages, stories have been passed down through generations, stories of sky visitors who came before the ancestors, who carved the stones to teach the earth how to listen. Though dismissed by most scholars as folklore, these tales persist with uncanny specificity. In some versions, the visitors are said to have spoken in symbols that glowed on stone, fading only after their departure. Of course, no material evidence supports such claims. But when oral tradition overlaps with physical mystery, the question becomes more difficult to ignore. The site has drawn attention from across disciplines: linguists, geologists, and even cognitive scientists, all attempting to decode whether the inscriptions are meaningful or coincidental. Some researchers have proposed a more grounded yet equally startling idea that these markings may represent a proto-symbolic system, early humans experimenting with symbolic thought, making the first tentative steps toward language long before it formally emerged. If true, the Shijiazhuang inscriptions could change how we understand the timeline of human cognition itself. Still, without a Rosetta Stone, interpretation remains elusive. The symbols cannot yet be read. No known language matches them exactly. Their purpose, if they had one, is obscured behind eons of erosion and silence. So we are left to wonder. Were these marks the idle scratchings of early humans, unaware of their significance? Or are they the remnants of a civilization lost so far back in time that even legend has forgotten them? And if that's the case, what else lies buried beneath our feet, in stones we have not yet learned to read? The Shijiazhuang stones do not offer answers, but they invite us to look closer, deeper, and longer, at the boundaries between nature and intention, between what we know and what we still don't. A mystery written not on parchment or bone, but into the very bedrock of time. From the silent inscriptions etched into stone near Shijiazhuang, we journey southwest, into the fog-laced river valleys of modern-day Chongqing, where mountains rise steeply from the mist and rivers carve deep scars into the land. It is here, among sheer cliff faces and hidden gorges, that another ancient mystery waits, suspended, quite literally, in the air. They are called boat coffins, and they are among the most peculiar and haunting funerary practices ever discovered in China. High above the ground, sometimes perched in rock niches, sometimes lashed to vertical cliff walls, wooden coffins shaped like long canoes have been found dangling over the landscape, seemingly defying logic and gravity. Some rest in stone cavities carved hundreds of feet above riverbanks. Others are found in clusters along narrow ledges, unreachable without serious climbing equipment. Many have remained untouched for centuries. These are the burial sites of the Ba people, an ancient culture that once thrived in the Sichuan Basin, dating as far back as 700 BC. Their civilization, largely overshadowed by the more dominant Shu and Shu kingdoms of the time, left behind little in terms of written records. What we know of them comes from oral traditions, fragments of bronze weaponry, and, most vividly, their dead. Why bury the dead in boats? And more puzzling still, why place them so high above the living world? Archaeologists believe the Ba practiced hanging coffin burials to preserve the remains from flooding, scavenging animals, and even desecration by rival tribes. The boat shape may have symbolized a journey, a vessel to carry the soul across a spiritual river, echoing ancient beliefs of the afterlife as a voyage. This interpretation, though widely accepted, is only part of the story. What remains unexplained is how they did it. Some coffins weigh hundreds of kilograms. The cliffs on which they rest are nearly vertical, and many of the ledges have no visible access from below. No carvings or scaffolding marks remain to suggest pulley systems. Even with modern climbing gear, reaching some of these sites would be dangerous. The logistics of raising entire coffins, with the body and grave goods inside, along a rocky cliff face over 2,000 years ago, remain largely speculative. Were these communities employing engineering techniques now forgotten? Were ropes and bamboo scaffolds involved? Or did they possess an understanding of balance and elevation beyond what's been preserved? Adding to the enigma is the symbolic consistency of the coffins. Though found at multiple sites across Sichuan, Yunnan, and even parts of Hubei, many share common features: elongated shapes, pointed ends, and a distinct method of closure using tightly fitted planks. They are often sealed with resin or clay, and some have markings etched faintly onto the wood. A few even contain small wooden oars or miniature figurines, as if the journey to the next world required both guidance and companionship. Could this indicate a shared cosmology, a belief in an afterlife reachable only by traversing the elements, air, water, and stone? Some scholars have drawn comparisons to burial practices found among ancient Austronesian seafaring cultures, whose boat-shaped coffins and cliffside burials share striking similarities. Is it possible the Ba were culturally connected, however distantly, to migratory or coastal peoples from further south or east? Others are more cautious, suggesting that the resemblance may be coincidental, or born of similar symbolic needs. The boat, after all, is a universal symbol of passage. But the question lingers. If these practices developed independently, why do the motifs align so closely across such vast distances? More fringe theorists propose bolder interpretations. The Ba people, they argue, may have seen death not as a descent into the earth, but as an ascension, a rising into a spiritual realm symbolized by the cliffs and skies. The suspended coffins, in this view, were not simply practical solutions to terrain or weather, but part of a sacred ritual to elevate the dead toward the heavens. The cliffs, some suggest, were chosen based on astrological alignment, with certain burial sites facing specific celestial points during solstices or equinoxes. There is no conclusive evidence for this theory. And yet, the care with which some coffins are positioned, always at specific heights, often facing east, has prompted further study. Some researchers have begun mapping the sites using 3D scans, searching for patterns in geography, orientation, and proximity to water sources. But time has not been kind to these fragile artifacts. Many coffins have fallen from their ledges over the centuries, shattered by erosion, earthquakes, or human interference. Others remain intact but inaccessible, dangling just out of reach, like puzzles suspended in air. Local legends speak of spirits guarding the cliffs, and in some places, climbing to retrieve a coffin is considered a violation of sacred ground. even the Ba themselves remain a mystery. Absorbed or displaced by the Qin dynasty around the 3rd century BC, their cultural memory faded quickly. Little survives of their language, their rituals, or their beliefs, except for these silent, weather-worn vessels still clinging to the mountainside. Why were these people so devoted to raising their dead toward the sky? What journey did they believe the soul must take, and what did they see waiting on the other side? The hanging boat coffins of the Ba endure as haunting symbols of a forgotten cosmology, carved into the living stone of China's landscape. Neither wholly understood nor fully explained, they challenge us to reconsider the limits of ancient engineering, the nature of cultural memory, and the strange, poetic ways human beings have always tried to touch the divine. And so they remain, suspended in the cliffs, in history, and in mystery, quiet vessels on an eternal voyage to somewhere just beyond our reach. From the misty cliffs of Chongqing, where the Ba people sent their dead skyward in boats of wood and ritual, we now descend into the ancient river valleys of southern China, a land once ruled by warriors and kings, where a different kind of mystery was forged not in silence but in steel. Here, in the heart of the ancient Yue Kingdom, nestled between the mountains and waterways of what is now Zhejiang province, archaeologists unearthed a relic so finely crafted, so untouched by time, that it seemed almost impossible. A sword, but not just any sword. The sword of Guodian, named after the legendary king of Yue who ruled during the late spring and autumn period, around 500 BC. Buried for over 2 millennia in a waterlogged tomb surrounded by bronze artifacts and organic remains, the blade was expected to be corroded, worn, barely recognizable. Instead, it gleamed. The bronze blade was sharp. The intricate patterns along its hilt were clear and crisp. And most puzzling of all, there was no rust. How could a 2,500-year-old weapon emerge from centuries of damp, acidic soil in near pristine condition? This question has puzzled scientists since its discovery in 1965. And the sword of Guodian was not alone. Other Yue swords, found in similar tombs across the region, display the same baffling resistance to corrosion. Their surfaces remain smooth and polished, their edges still capable of slicing paper. Even their inscriptions, written in ancient script, are cleanly legible, despite the passage of time and the conditions of their burial. What kind of metallurgy were the Yue using? The Yue were considered fierce and culturally distinct by their northern rivals. Known for their naval strength and swordsmanship, they were often viewed by more centralized powers like the Chu and the Zhou as outsiders, wild, untamed, and dangerous. And yet, their mastery of bronze weaponry suggests a technological sophistication far ahead of their time. Modern analysis of the swords has revealed traces of sulfur and chromium compounds embedded in the metal. Some believe this created a thin, invisible layer of protection that sealed the surface against oxidation, an early form of passivation, akin to techniques used in stainless steel today. But chromium wasn't believed to be purposefully used in metalwork until the 20th century. Could the Yue have stumbled upon a technique long before modern science rediscovered it? And if so, how? One possibility is that the effect was an unintended byproduct, perhaps a result of the specific ore used or a quirk of the smelting process. The hills of southern China are rich in minerals, and the unique composition of the local clay and water may have played a role in preserving the weapons. Still, this doesn't fully explain the consistency of the results across different burial sites, nor the advanced craftsmanship evident in the blades themselves. Were these swords simply the product of skilled trial and error, perfected over generations? Or were they the guarded legacy of a knowledge now lost? Some researchers have speculated that the Yue maintained secret metallurgical traditions, passed only among elite smiths, possibly ritualized and embedded within their warrior culture. The forging of a sword may have been more than functional, it may have been sacred. Certain tombs depict weapons arranged in ceremonial configurations, sometimes alongside musical instruments, suggesting symbolic as well as martial value. But others have pushed the speculation further. Could this represent evidence of a forgotten lineage of technology, an early form of material science that vanished with the fall of Yue? Were these techniques ever shared, or were they deliberately buried, like the swords themselves? And what might we learn from them today? Despite decades of research, attempts to reproduce the exact conditions under which the rust-proof layer forms have proven difficult. While some chemical factors can be simulated, the precise balance of temperature, cooling time, alloy mixture, and environmental influence remains elusive. The metallurgy of the Yue remains, in many ways, a puzzle still half solved. Yet the mystery does not stop at metallurgy. Inscriptions on the sword of Guodian reference the king by name, linking it directly to historical records. The blade's symmetry and weight distribution suggest a weapon designed not only for beauty, but for deadly precision. Its design reflects an understanding of balance and function that would be impressive even by modern standards. Was this the pinnacle of a long evolution of sword-making, or something else entirely? Curiously, other swords from the same period across China do not exhibit the same corrosion resistance. The Chu, the Han, even the Shang, all great cultures with advanced bronze casting traditions, failed to replicate what the Yue achieved. Why? Did the Yue discover something no one else did? Or did they inherit something more ancient? Some fringe theorists have proposed that the Yue preserved a deeper tradition of knowledge, possibly handed down from even older societies, now forgotten. They point to the symbolism on the blades, lightning bolts, serpentine patterns, and circular motifs, as evidence of esoteric wisdom embedded in craftsmanship. Others link the Yue's maritime prowess with contact across seas, perhaps suggesting a cultural exchange with distant lands where metallurgy developed along separate lines. There is no firm evidence for these theories. But the swords remain, and they refuse to rust. Today, the sword of Guodian is housed in the Hubei Provincial Museum, protected behind glass, admired for its elegance and its defiance of time. Visitors stand in awe, not only of its beauty, but of the question it silently presents. How did they do this? And if one ancient kingdom could forge a blade that outlives even the memory of its makers, what else might they have known that we've yet to rediscover? In a world where metal decays, where even empires turn to dust, the swords of Yue endure, sharp, silent, and gleaming, reminders that not all knowledge is linear, and not all mysteries are buried in myth. Some are held in the palm of your hand. From the gleaming rust-proof swords of the Yue, silent testaments to craftsmanship that still baffles modern metallurgy, we now move into another realm of ancient ingenuity, one that doesn't lie buried in the earth or sealed in a tomb, but within the pages of historical texts, and in stories that feel too advanced for their time. This is the world of mechanical automata in ancient China. Machines made not of code and silicon, but of bronze, wood, and water. Devices that moved, walked, played music, centuries, even millennia, before the invention of electricity. The accounts come from scrolls written long ago, preserved across dynasties, retold by scholars and recorded by scribes. At first, they read like fables, too wondrous to be true. But as more details emerge and as archaeological finds begin to align with historical records, a strange truth becomes harder to dismiss. Ancient China may have developed working machines, complex automata that rivaled those of Renaissance Europe, and perhaps even preceded them by over 1,000 years. One of the earliest and most striking descriptions comes from the writings of Liezi, a Taoist text compiled in the 3rd century AD, though referencing events that may date back much earlier. In it, a tale is told of an engineer named Yan Shi, who, during the reign of King Mu of Zhou in the 10th century BC, presented his ruler with a life-sized mechanical man. This creation could walk, bow, move its limbs, and even sing. The king, amazed, at first thought it was a real person. But when the chest was opened, he saw a complex system of wood, leather, and springs, gears interlocked, joints articulated, organs mimicked through mechanical design. According to the tale, when the automaton's liver was removed, it could no longer speak. Remove its heart, and it stopped moving altogether. Was this metaphor? Symbolism of Taoist philosophy? Or was it a reflection, however exaggerated, of real mechanical experimentation? Skeptics often dismiss the story as allegorical, but other records add weight to the possibility that early Chinese inventors were working with far more advanced mechanical principles than commonly believed. By the Han Dynasty, around 200 BC, mechanical engineers like Zhang Heng and Ma Jun were creating devices that clearly functioned, south-pointing chariots, for example, which used differential gears to keep a figure always pointing in the same direction, regardless of the chariot's movement. These were not myths. They were tangible, practical innovations, many of which were recorded in detail by court historians. Ma Jun's most famous invention, perhaps, was a water-powered puppet theater. Automated figures that performed intricate scenes, operated entirely by flowing water, hidden channels, and rotating gears. Later inventors would expand upon these designs, producing automated musicians, clockwork figures, and elaborate mechanical fountains. And then, there's the legendary cosmic engine of Su Song, a towering astronomical clock built in the 11th century AD. While outside the BC timeline of earlier innovations, it demonstrated a continuity of mechanical understanding that may well have roots in far older traditions. The device included an escapement mechanism, a critical component in mechanical clocks that wouldn't appear in Europe until centuries later. But Su Song's masterpiece did not arise from nowhere. It built upon foundations already in place. So again, the question surfaces: how far back did this knowledge reach? No complete automaton from the Zhou or Han dynasties has survived. If one was built by Yan Shi or his contemporaries, it would likely have decayed or been dismantled long ago. But some scholars point to fragments, gears, jointed figures, water regulators, and bronze components found at ancient sites that suggest a tradition of precision engineering once existed, though it may not have been widespread. Why, then, was this knowledge not more thoroughly preserved? It may come down to how knowledge was transmitted or lost. Wars, fires, regime changes. Ancient China's history is marked by cycles of cultural flourishing and sudden collapse. When dynasties fell, libraries burned, artisans scattered, and practical knowledge, especially if it wasn't immediately useful for warfare or survival, could easily be forgotten. Or perhaps these machines were never meant for public use. Some historians speculate that mechanical marvels were reserved for the elite, used in court ceremonies, private rituals, or displays of imperial power. In such a setting, the automaton wasn't just a machine. It was an expression of cosmic order, a reminder that, through skill and wisdom, man could mimic the workings of the universe. Still, others wonder, were these automata purely symbolic, or part of a now-lost tradition of mechanical experimentation and innovation far more widespread than we've yet realized? Fringe theorists have proposed even bolder interpretations. Some suggest the early Chinese automata may have drawn from prehistoric sources of lost technology, echoing ideas found in Indian, Mesopotamian, or even rumored Central Asian traditions. There is no direct evidence of this, only tantalizing overlaps in myth, such as the mythological engineers of multiple ancient cultures who crafted lifelike machines for gods and kings. But whether one views these stories as fact, fable, or something in between, they raise enduring questions. Why were the Chinese developing such machines so early in history? How much of that early knowledge has been erased? Not by malice, but by time. And if detailed mechanical design could flourish in the hands of a few court engineers 2,000 years ago, what else might they have built, and why has so little survived? The automata of ancient China may never walk again. Their gears have long since turned to dust, but the mystery of their creation continues to tick, quietly, steadily, just beneath the surface of recorded history. And like the soft clicking of unseen mechanisms, their legacy reminds us there are machines we have yet to remember. From the ticking echoes of ancient machines, automata that whispered through wood and bronze, we now turn to something far quieter, something that doesn't move at all. And yet, it holds within it the power to reshape how we understand the very roots of Chinese philosophy, language, and civilization. It was in the spring of 1993, in a quiet tomb outside the city of Jingmen, in Hubei province, that workers made a startling discovery beneath layers of compacted earth and time-worn stone. The burial site, dated to around 300 BC, appeared ordinary at first, another tomb from the Warring States period. But nestled alongside the skeletal remains of its occupant was a bundle of bamboo slips, fragile, darkened with age, bound once by silk, long since disintegrated. These were the Guodian bamboo slips, and they would soon be recognized as one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Delicately etched with early Chinese script, the slips number over 800 in total, each one a thin, rectangular fragment of bamboo no more than a few centimeters wide. Together, they form a patchwork of thought, philosophy, and something else, something that even now resists full understanding. Among the texts identified are early versions of works attributed to Confucius, such as the Analects, as well as parts of the Taoist classic Zhuangzi, and a little-known text called the Tai Yi Sheng Shui, the Great One gave birth to water. This last work, in particular, is one of the oldest known philosophical cosmologies in Chinese history. But not all the slips have revealed their secrets. Dozens of them remain untranslated, their meanings elusive. The characters are real, but their arrangement, context, syntax, even intent seems out of step with known texts. In some cases, the symbols appear archaic, unstandardized, or intentionally abstract. In others, they form phrases scholars have never seen before, lines that don't appear in any other known manuscript from any Chinese tradition. What are they? Lost teachings, ritual instructions, personal reflections, or something else entirely? Conventional interpretations suggest these could be fragments of yet undiscovered philosophical works, regional variations of canonical texts, or notes from a forgotten school of thought. Others theorize they may be early pedagogical tools, copied by a student or scribe whose work never reached completion. But there are patterns, curious ones. Some of the untranslated slips seem to revolve around cosmological themes, describing cycles of water, wind, and light in language that feels more mythic than instructional. Others reference beings or forces not present in Confucian or Taoist literature, echoes perhaps of older traditions, now erased by time or the unification of thought that followed under the Qin and Han dynasties. And yet, the slips were buried with care. Their placement in the tomb, alongside jade ornaments, ceremonial objects, and a body believed to be that of a tutor or philosopher, suggests reverence, not randomness. Whatever these texts contain, they were considered worthy companions into death. Which raises another question. Were these slips never meant for the living? Some scholars have speculated that the untranslated sections may represent esoteric teachings, passed only within closed circles. Much like secret doctrines in other ancient traditions, they may have required oral interpretation, meanings conveyed face to face, never meant to survive in written form alone. Could we be holding the shell of a deeper wisdom, the husk of something that once moved between teacher and pupil, but has since been severed from its key? There's also the matter of the script itself. The Guodian slips use a form of writing known as Chu script, a regional variation used by the state of Chu during the Warring States period. Chu script is notoriously difficult to interpret, even when the vocabulary is known. It includes unique character forms, subtle stylizations, and contextual idioms that often defy direct translation. It's possible, some believe, that the meaning of the untranslated slips is hidden not in the words themselves, but in how they were written, the rhythm, the spacing, even the arrangement of the slips when originally bound. If so, our modern approach, viewing them one by one, isolated and preserved in museum conditions, may obscure what they once revealed. More speculative theories exist, as they often do when silence lingers in the face of the unknown. Some fringe researchers suggest that the untranslated slips represent a fusion of traditions, possibly from non-Chinese or peripheral cultures that interacted with the Chu. There are linguistic elements that feel foreign, metaphorical constructions not seen elsewhere in early Chinese texts. Could these slips be a rare window into a syncretic worldview, a cultural hybrid born from the borderlands of ancient China? And if so, who were the people who wrote them? We may never know. The tomb at Guodian offers no definitive names, no detailed biographies. The slips, though rich in implication, are mute on identity. Their contents hint at a thinker, or perhaps a group, positioned delicately between established schools of thought. Neither strictly Confucian nor fully Taoist, neither orthodox nor rebellious, but thoughtful, observant, and possessed of a vision that even now we struggle to reconstruct. Today, the Guodian bamboo slips reside in protected vaults, scanned, photographed, and carefully preserved. Teams of scholars continue their work, cross-referencing, hypothesizing, translating one glyph at a time. But the unanswered slips remain. What truths lie beneath their surface? Are they the final pieces of a forgotten doctrine, or the first glimpses of one never fully born? In a world where knowledge is often assumed to progress in straight lines, the Guodian slips remind us that understanding is fragile, that wisdom may arrive in fragments, that the past is not a single story, but a conversation still ongoing between what was written and what was meant. And somewhere, between bamboo and silence, that conversation continues. From the fragile bamboo slips of Guodian, inked thoughts drifting silently through centuries, we now return to an older time still, where the boundary between myth and memory begins to blur. The 10th century BC, the early Zhou dynasty. A king is said to have ruled not only with power, but with vision. His name was King Mu, the 5th sovereign of the Western Zhou. A ruler remembered less for conquest than for curiosity. And at the heart of his legend, among accounts of celestial voyages and journeys to the ends of the world, is one of the most elusive mysteries in Chinese antiquity: the tale of the floating palaces. According to ancient texts like the Mu Tianzi Zhuan, the Travels of King Mu, this Zhou king embarked on an extraordinary expedition to the far west, a journey that would become the stuff of legend. Riding in a chariot drawn by 8 dragon-like steeds, King Mu sought not war, but wonder. His goal? To meet the Queen Mother of the West, a divine figure said to dwell at the edge of the known world. But interwoven in this mythic journey are recurring references to massive, ornate structures said to move across lakes and rivers, floating palaces adorned with towers, balconies, and banners that danced with the wind. Were they barges, ritual vessels, elaborate metaphors? Or could they have been something real? Descriptions across different records vary in detail, but certain features repeat. The structures were grand, multi-leveled, and capable of movement. Some floated by water, others, according to more speculative readings, seemed to move without visible propulsion. They carried entire retinues of court officials, scholars, and musicians. In some versions, King Mu used these vessels not just to travel, but to host banquets, conduct rituals, and gaze at the stars. Traditional scholars have often interpreted these accounts as literary embellishments, royal propaganda, or Taoist allegory. Floating palaces, they argue, represent the ephemeral nature of power, or the king's spiritual detachment from earthly concerns. Others suggest the structures were simply massive pleasure boats, perhaps similar in scale to the luxurious river craft used later in Chinese history during the Tang and Song dynasties. Yet questions remain. How advanced was Zhou engineering? Could such vessels truly have existed nearly 3,000 years ago? And if they did, why have no remnants been found? While no physical remains of the floating palaces have surfaced, some intriguing pieces of circumstantial evidence persist. Bronze fittings, strange architectural fragments, and ancient mooring stones have been discovered near now-dry riverbeds in Shanxi and Gansu provinces, regions associated with King Mu's western campaign. These finds aren't conclusive, but they suggest activity along water routes that could support large mobile platforms. Additionally, early Chinese texts often blur the line between reality and symbolism. Astronomical events are written as omens. Political acts are described in cosmic language. In this cultural context, a floating palace may have been both literal and symbolic, a real structure elevated into myth through time and retelling. But some elements are harder to explain. One passage from the Mu Tianzi Zhuan mentions a palace that glowed from within as it moved across the dark waters, while another describes its frame as light yet unyielding, made of a material unknown to ordinary craftsmen. These descriptions, vivid, almost otherworldly, have led to more fringe interpretations. Some researchers, operating at the margins of conventional scholarship, have suggested that King Mu may have inherited knowledge from earlier, forgotten civilizations. According to this theory, the floating palaces were not just ceremonial vessels, but technological relics, part of a tradition of advanced engineering lost to history or suppressed during later periods of cultural consolidation. Others go further still. Could the floating palaces have been inspired by contact with foreign or even non-human intelligences? The 8-horse chariot is often cited in speculative literature as a possible metaphor for something mechanical or aerial. The luminous nature of the palace, its effortless motion across water or land. Are these poetic descriptions of unknown technologies? Of course, no serious archaeological evidence supports such claims. But the symbolism, persistent and strange, is difficult to ignore. Even within mainstream academic circles, there is a growing recognition that early Chinese civilization may have been far more technologically diverse and experimentally rich than once assumed. The ancient world was not static. It was full of movement, both physical and intellectual. And the Zhou court, in particular, was a nexus of inherited Shang traditions, tribal influences, and shifting philosophical paradigms. King Mu, by legend, a ruler of restless curiosity, may have been more than a passive figure in myth. He may have commissioned the construction of ambitious, hybrid vessels, part architecture, part machine, waterborne courts that served both practical and symbolic purposes, to travel, to display power, to reenact cosmic order on Earth. And yet, we have only stories, ink on bamboo, characters on silk, a few buried fragments, eroded by time. What was the true nature of these floating palaces? Were they mythic metaphors for spiritual transcendence, or physical wonders that have simply vanished beneath the silt of time? And if King Mu's journey westward really did happen, what else might he have encountered? What landscapes, what knowledge, what architecture that slipped through the cracks of history? In the silence left behind by these questions, the floating palaces drift once more, through memory, through myth, through the still waters of China's ancient rivers. Neither proven nor disproven, they remain suspended between legend and reality, waiting to be found or remembered. From the drifting majesty of King Mu's floating palaces, suspended between water and sky, we now journey north, into the windswept plains of northeastern China, where another civilization once thrived long before the dynasties of written history began. This is the domain of the Hongshan culture, an ancient society that flourished in the Liao River basin in what is now Liaoning and Inner Mongolia, more than 5,000 years ago. Long buried beneath layers of earth and time, its remnants began to surface in the early 20th century, and with them, a mystery. At the heart of this enigma are jade artifacts, uncanny in form, striking in craftsmanship, and altogether unlike anything found elsewhere in Neolithic China. In dusty excavation pits and hillside tombs, archaeologists uncovered strange and beautiful objects: coiled dragons with swirling torsos, humanoid figures with almond eyes and elongated heads, and flat, smooth discs whose purpose remains unknown. These were not tools. They were not weapons. They were symbols of something. Some are delicate and abstract, their lines suggesting serpents or birds. Others are powerful and unsettling, with stylized horns, wings, and staring eyes, beings that seem neither fully human nor fully animal. Many were found buried with care, often placed near the heads of the dead, or grouped in ceremonial arrangements. But perhaps the most iconic is the C-shaped dragon, or Zhulong. A creature carved from jade in a spiral, its snout turned inward, its tail curling like smoke. This motif appears again and again in Hongshan sites. Was it a protective spirit? A god? An emblem of transformation? Mainstream archaeology places the Hongshan culture in the Neolithic era, around 4500 to 3000 BC, contemporary with other early societies like the Yangshao in central China. But while their settlements and pottery are similar in some respects, the jade artifacts of Hongshan stand apart, both in scale and in symbolic complexity. How did a society so ancient produce such refined jade objects? Jade is notoriously hard to work with. It cannot be carved with metal knives. It must be slowly abraded, polished over days or weeks using stone, sand, and water. It requires patience, skill, and intention. And yet, these people, long before bronze, before written language, were shaping jade into forms that even now resist easy explanation. No records tell us what these symbols meant. No scrolls or inscriptions remain. All we have is the jade, and the silence it keeps. Some scholars suggest that the artifacts were ritual objects, used in shamanistic ceremonies or funerary rites. The Hongshan built complex temples and altars, rare for the Neolithic period, including the famed Goddess Temple at New Heliang, where life-sized clay figures were found amid offerings and jade relics. The presence of female deities, ancestral worship, and dragon iconography has led many to believe that the Hongshan were part of an early spiritual tradition that eventually shaped Taoist and Chinese cosmological thought. But the connection is speculative. There is no direct lineage, only echoes. Other researchers have proposed that the jade artifacts were markers of social status, held by elites to demonstrate power. But even this explanation falls short. Why invest so much labor in objects that served no utilitarian purpose? Why bury them rather than display them? And then there are the forms themselves. Several jade figures, particularly those with large heads and narrow eyes, have sparked fringe speculation. Their exaggerated features, some argue, resemble extraterrestrial beings or sky gods. The Zhulong, with its serpentine shape and ambiguous limbs, has even been interpreted by some as evidence of ancient contact with unknown intelligences. There is no scientific proof for such claims, but the appeal of the mystery is undeniable. A more grounded, though equally intriguing theory posits that the Hongshan may have been an isolated center of symbolic innovation, a society that developed its own cosmology, complete with deities, animal spirits, and an aesthetic entirely its own. Over time, fragments of this worldview may have diffused southward, influencing early dynasties and leaving faint imprints in Chinese myth. Yet, the deeper question remains: how did a Neolithic people, without cities, without metallurgy, achieve such artistic and symbolic depth? Unlike the later Shang or Zhou cultures, the Hongshan left behind no written language. Their legacy survives only in stone and clay and jade. And in those artifacts, there is a sense not just of beauty, but of meaning, a language of form and symbol that we can no longer read. Are we looking at gods, ancestors, celestial maps, tools for ritual ecstasy, or something else altogether? There's one final detail, often overlooked. Many of the jade artifacts were not found in isolation, but near carefully arranged burial sites, some with human remains, others without. Some were aligned with celestial markers, suggesting an awareness of astronomy, of time, of cycles. Did the Hongshan view jade as a conduit between realms? A means to speak with the stars, the ancestors, the unseen? We don't know. But as the wind moves across the Liao Basin today, rustling dry grass over long-forgotten foundations, one can't help but wonder. What dreams were carved into stone here 5,000 years ago? What stories were whispered into jade, now long vanished from memory? And most hauntingly of all, what deeper knowledge still lies buried beneath this ancient earth, waiting to be unearthed and understood? The jade of the Hongshan remains, cool to the touch, smooth with age, mysterious as ever. Silent witnesses to a civilization whose voice we have not yet learned to hear. From the carved jade relics of the Hongshan, whispers from a Neolithic world of mystery and symbol, we move now to a land veiled in mist and legend, a place tucked deep within the rugged mountains and fertile plains of Sichuan, where an ancient kingdom once flourished in near-complete isolation from the great dynasties that rose to the east. This is the enigma of the Shu Kingdom. For centuries, the story of Shu existed mostly in legend. Its rulers mythologized, its people remembered only in regional folklore. Chinese classical texts mentioned Shu briefly, often as a distant, semi-mythical realm beyond the passes of the Qinling Mountains, a place of unusual customs, powerful shamans, and golden treasures. But little else was known. That changed in 1986, near the modern city of Guanghan, when construction workers inadvertently uncovered what would become one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in Chinese history, the Sanxingdui site. What they found defied expectations. From a pair of sacrificial pits emerged an array of objects that had no clear precedent in Chinese art or ritual. Towering bronze masks with protruding eyes, elephant-sized trees cast in metal, sacred altars, gold scepters, and statues of figures with mysterious postures, each piece more alien than the last. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the symbolism baffling, and most importantly, none of it fit neatly into the known timeline of early Chinese civilization. These artifacts were dated to roughly 1200 BC, placing them in the same era as the Shang dynasty in the Central Plains. But unlike Shang artifacts, which emphasized symmetry, oracle bones, and ancestral veneration, the relics at Sanxingdui seemed to come from an entirely different cultural imagination. Who were these people? Where did they come from? And what became of them? Archaeologists believe that Sanxingdui was part of the ancient Shu Kingdom, an advanced society that developed independently in the Sichuan Basin, shielded by mountain ranges and rivers that made travel difficult. The Shu cultivated their own worldview, their own rituals, and, seemingly, their own cosmology. Bronze artifacts from the site suggest a high level of metallurgical skill, comparable to or even surpassing that of the Shang. Their stylized motifs, spirals, sunbursts, fantastical creatures, hint at a symbolic system that remains undeciphered. Some theorize the large bronze eyes and exaggerated features of the masks were used in religious ceremonies, possibly to transform the identity of the wearer or to channel the spirits of gods. Yet so far, no written language has been recovered from the site. No tablets, no inscriptions. The Shu, it seems, left no words behind. Only images, only symbols, and then something even stranger. Sometime around 1000 BC, the Sanxingdui site appears to have been abandoned. The sacrificial pits, ritually burned and sealed. The city, left behind. A few centuries later, a new center of power emerged about 40 kilometers away at a site now called Jinsha. Similar artifacts appear there, but smaller, less monumental. Why did the Shu move? Was it natural disaster? Political upheaval? Religious transition? Or something we've yet to understand? Mainstream archaeology suggests an earthquake or flood may have altered the course of the nearby Minjiang River, disrupting irrigation and forcing the population to migrate. But the suddenness of the abandonment, the deliberate burning of sacred objects, and the lack of warfare evidence have led others to speculate about deeper causes, perhaps ideological or spiritual. Was there a crisis of belief? A catastrophic event interpreted as divine displeasure? Or perhaps something more enigmatic, a decision to hide or protect sacred knowledge, burying it beneath the earth before vanishing into history. While the later Shu Kingdom would re-emerge in historical records during the Warring States period, the connection between this later polity and the Sanxingdui culture remains murky. Are they linked by blood, by migration, or merely by geography? Some fringe theorists have pushed the mystery further. Could the Shu have been descended from an even older civilization, one now lost to time? Some point to the unique features of the bronze work, the advanced casting techniques, the massive sizes of the objects, as signs of knowledge not easily acquired. Others note that the stylized trees and celestial symbols could represent cosmic maps or portals, metaphysical connections between the earthly and the divine. Even the bronze mask with bulging, slanted eyes has drawn attention from those who see in it a figure not of this world, a deity, a shaman transformed, or, as the more speculative voices suggest, an ancient memory of something not entirely human. There is no definitive proof of these ideas. And yet, the power of the Shu mystery lies in what it withholds. Sanxingdui has revealed only a fraction of its story. New excavations continue, most recently in 2021, where 6 new sacrificial pits were discovered, containing even more stunning relics. Jade daggers, golden masks, intricate woven textiles preserved in ash. The more that is unearthed, the less we seem to know. The Shu Kingdom stands as a reminder that Chinese civilization was never a singular, linear progression. It was a tapestry, woven from countless cultures, some of which have only now begun to re-emerge. What wisdom did the Shu possess that vanished with them? Why did they cast their gods in bronze and bury them beneath the earth? And could their silence be the key, not to what we think we know, but to an entire world we have yet to rediscover? The mountains still stand, the river still flows, but beneath the soil of Sichuan, a kingdom sleeps, waiting, watching, and perhaps still holding secrets that no dynasty could claim. From the silent ruins of the Shu Kingdom, where bronze gods once watched from beneath the earth, we move now into the age of strife and refinement, an era where warfare raged across the land, yet art and technology reached dazzling heights. The Warring States period, a time of conflict, but also innovation. It is here, amid the ashes of ancient battlefields and the tombs of nobles long buried, that archaeologists have encountered something truly perplexing. Lacquerware, perfectly preserved. Not just intact, but seemingly impervious to flame. Across sites dating back to 475–221 BC, researchers have unearthed lacquered vessels, armor, and wooden artifacts that, despite being interred for over 2 millennia, sometimes in conditions touched by fire, remain gleaming, their surfaces unscorched, red and black pigments still vivid, finely painted patterns undisturbed. Objects that should have rotted, warped, or burned haven't. The Chinese had used lacquer for centuries by that point, drawn from the sap of the Toxicodendron vernicifluum tree, laboriously processed and applied in dozens of thin layers. But the lacquer work from the Warring States stands apart. It is more than decorative. In some cases, it seems to have acted as a sealant, a preservative, and even a shield. But how? Lacquer by nature is flammable before it cures. Once hardened, it becomes water-resistant and durable, but not fireproof. And yet, items recovered from tombs in Hubei, Hunan, and Shanxi show evidence of having survived high temperatures, sometimes even near cremated remains. In several instances, charcoal layers from collapsed funerary chambers suggest fires once swept through the burial site, while the lacquerware within remained untouched. Was this merely chance? Were the objects buried deeply enough, sealed tightly enough, to avoid the worst of the flames? Or did the artisans of this era possess a knowledge of chemical treatment that we no longer understand? Mainstream scholars propose that certain natural additives, perhaps powdered minerals, rare oils, or resin blends, may have altered the properties of the lacquer. However, no consistent formula has yet been found. Analyses of the surviving artifacts reveal slight variations in composition, hints at a lost tradition of formulation, passed from master to apprentice, guarded within workshops that vanished long ago. In Zheng Hoyi's tomb, discovered near Suizhou in 1978, one lacquered wooden chest was found alongside bronze bells, musical instruments, and delicately preserved silk. The chest bore no scorching, despite the clear evidence of heat damage nearby. The lacquer's shine remained brilliant, still reflecting light as if newly finished. Could this technique have been tied to ritual knowledge, religious craft, or even military utility? Some texts from the Warring States era, such as the Kagongji, a classic treatise on craftsmanship and materials, mention complex preparations of lacquer, including prolonged exposure to smoke, steaming, and mysterious purification stages. The descriptions are often vague, framed in ceremonial language, perhaps deliberately cryptic. Were these processes practical, symbolic, or both? Then there are the armor pieces, curved strips of lacquered wood and leather, found bound together in a lamellar pattern. Light, flexible, and highly resistant to decay. In warfare, weight matters. So does resilience. Could these lacquers have offered a form of thermal resistance, protecting soldiers not just from blades, but from flaming arrows and incendiary devices? It's a possibility that intrigues military historians. But without intact manufacturing records, we are left with more questions than answers. and not all of them are conventional. In recent years, some researchers have suggested that the secret of fire-resistant lacquer may lie in now-lost materials, perhaps substances sourced from regions no longer identifiable, or from forest ecologies altered by centuries of climate and cultivation. Others speculate that the base formula we understand today may have been augmented by organic compounds that degrade over time, making them difficult to detect in residue analysis. Then there are the more speculative theories. Could certain ancient artisans have possessed a deeper understanding of thermal chemistry than previously believed? Or perhaps knowledge inherited from even older traditions? Proto-chemical disciplines passed down from Neolithic technologists, like those who worked jade in the Hongshan or smelted bronze in Sanxingdui. More fringe voices have gone further still, suggesting a ritualistic or energetic dimension to the lacquer process. In this view, the act of lacquering was not merely mechanical, but spiritual, an alchemical transformation of substance and spirit. The layering of lacquer, the heating, the drying, the polishing, each stage an invocation of protection, preservation, permanence. Could belief itself have shaped the material? Or more plausibly, could belief have driven experimentation so precise, so patient, that it achieved what we now struggle to replicate? In many ways, this is the heart of the mystery. Science seeks repeatability. But the ancient world did not always write its instructions down. It taught through craft, through ritual, through memory. And when the masters died, when the lineage was broken, the knowledge sometimes died with them. Today, conservators and material scientists are trying to reconstruct these ancient formulas. Some success has been achieved. Modern lacquers inspired by historical recipes have shown surprising durability, but none have matched the complete preservation of some warring states pieces, especially under fire conditions. Why? What have we overlooked? Could there be a substance, a process, a treatment still unknown, a missing component in the lacquerer's kit? Or was it, as some texts suggest, the culmination of mind, method, and material, a harmony between nature and human will, lost in the mechanization of later eras? For now, the lacquer remains, gleaming red, polished black, untouched by flame, untouched by time. Silent proof of something, skill, science, or sorcery that the ancients knew and we have yet to recover. And so we ask, what else did they know about fire, about protection, about permanence? And what other secrets still lie sealed within the lacquered wood of their forgotten hands? From the fire-defying lacquer of the warring states, where brilliance was forged in silence and resilience, we journey now into the shadowed heart of an ancient kingdom once nestled in the rugged terrain of what is now Hebei province. Here, among weathered stones and forgotten tombs, stand the remnants of something stranger still, a presence not always seen, but often felt. This is the enigma of the ghost walls of Zhongshan. Zhongshan was a small but sophisticated state during the Warring States period, bordered by larger powers like Zhao and Yan. It was a land of strategic ambition, cultural hybridity, and quiet innovation. But it is not military might or royal lineage that draws attention to Zhongshan today. It is what remains within its walls, and what doesn't. Unearthed near Pingshan County, the ruins of the ancient Zhongshan capital revealed what at first appeared to be a typical fortified structure. Rectangular enclosures, stone foundations, gate remnants. Yet as archaeologists examined the site, they began to notice peculiarities. The layout was unusually complex, multiple overlapping enclosures, with strange, discontinuous partitions, walls built, but seemingly designed not to defend, nor to mark clear boundaries. Some were too thin to serve a structural purpose. Others curved in ways that suggested deliberate confusion, bending sightlines and obscuring movement. In some places, walls stopped abruptly, with no connection point, leaving gaps that defied logic. And then there were the walls that weren't there at all. In several areas of the site, traces of walls exist without physical remains. A foundation trench, a clear delineation in soil color, but no stones, no bricks, no debris. Almost as if the walls had vanished, or had never been built. Local legends soon resurfaced, passed down for generations. Tales of invisible walls, vanishing corridors, and phantom battlements. Stories told of soldiers who walked one path and returned on another, of kings who vanished behind walls no one else could see. Archaeologists took notice but remained cautious. These ghost walls, they argued, might be the remnants of temporary constructions, perhaps wood or earth structures long since eroded, or symbolic boundaries laid down not for function, but for ritual or psychological effect. And yet, the mystery deepened. Ground-penetrating radar and soil analyses confirmed that in several places, construction trenches existed with no corresponding superstructure. Something had once stood there, or was planned to, but it had either been dismantled without a trace or never brought into material form. In these areas, animal bones, bronze fragments, and pottery shards were found carefully placed, almost as offerings. What were these walls meant to contain or protect? Some scholars suggest that Zhongshan's unusual fortifications were part of a sophisticated psychological defense system. The walls didn't need to stand tall if they could confuse or intimidate. If invaders couldn't map the terrain, they couldn't navigate it. If pathways shifted in the mind, fear might do the rest. Others propose that the ghost walls were ritual constructs, designed to reflect an unseen world layered atop the visible. A city whose layout was meant not only for the living, but for the spirits of the dead. Zhongshan tombs, especially that of King Cheng, are unlike others from the period. Within one royal tomb, thin partitions form a maze-like structure. Some lead to nowhere. Others turn sharply, mimicking the discontinuous wall patterns above ground. The burial chamber is surrounded by false doors, blind corridors, and trap-like alcoves. Not meant to protect against thieves, it seems, but perhaps to confuse malevolent forces. This belief in spatial deception, architecture as a tool to control unseen entities, has precedent in early Chinese cosmology. In Feng Shui, energy is guided through space. Movement and flow are as important as structure. In Taoist thought, that which is not present can be just as powerful as what is. And in funerary practice, misdirection was often used to protect the soul or mislead it. But what if there is more to this? Some researchers, particularly those studying comparative ritual architecture, have drawn connections between Zhongshan's ghost walls and other global phenomena. Spirit paths in Mesoamerica, invisible enclosures in pre-Roman Europe, or symbolic mazes etched into Neolithic stones. Is it possible that these structures were not just metaphors, but tools of interaction, an interface between human and spiritual realms? Fringe theorists have offered bolder interpretations. They argue that the ghost walls reflect early experimentation with non-material constructs, boundaries created through sound, vibration, or resonance. Some have even posited that Zhongshan may have possessed ritual knowledge capable of manipulating perception or creating temporary illusions. There is no direct evidence for this, but the psychological effect of the site is real. Visitors to the reconstructed map of the capital often report a sense of disorientation, of walking a space that resists comprehension. The paths feel incomplete, yet intentional. It is, as one researcher described, a city that seems to remember something and forget it at the same time. And that brings us back to the walls, the ones that appear where no wall stands, and the ones that once stood without foundation. Were they ever meant to exist in the physical world? Or were they laid down for another purpose, part of a forgotten language of space and silence. Zhongshan is not among the great capitals of China's ancient dynasties. It does not boast the towering ramparts of Xianyang or the sprawling grandeur of Luoyang, but within its quiet ruins lies a different kind of monument, not to power, but to perception, to the idea that what shapes a city isn't always what's built, but what's believed. And so we ask, were these ghost walls defenses, ceremonial constructs, psychic mazes, or were they left for someone or something we no longer understand? In Zhongshan, the stones remain. The empty paths still twist and turn, and somewhere between presence and absence, a mystery continues to trace its outline through time. From the shadowy passageways of Zhongshan, where walls once whispered confusion into stone and silence, we now step into another realm of mystery, one not bound by architecture, but by belief. Here, in the apothecaries of ancient China, among bundles of dried herbs and powdered minerals, rests a substance so revered and so enigmatic, it was believed to contain the essence of the Earth's oldest creature. They called it Longu, dragon bone. In traditional Chinese medicine, dragon bones have been used for over 2,000 years. Ground into powder, steeped in wine, or boiled into tonics, they were prescribed to treat a wide array of ailments: insomnia, anxiety, chronic fatigue, even spiritual disturbances. Physicians and healers believed these bones could calm the mind, anchor the soul, and restore balance between the forces of yin and yang. But what exactly were these dragon bones? For centuries, no one questioned their origin. In Chinese mythology, dragons were cosmic beings, shapeshifters of wind and rain, rulers of the rivers and skies. Their bones, it was believed, could be found in the mountains where dragons had died or returned to the earth. Local villagers would unearth fragments of white, fossil-like bone and offer them to herbalists and markets, sometimes ritually blessed before sale. They were revered. They were powerful. They were everywhere. It wasn't until the early 20th century that a startling realization occurred, one that would change not only the understanding of medicine, but of history itself. In 1899, during the late Qing Dynasty, a scholar named Wang Yirong was suffering from malaria. A traditional healer prescribed him powdered dragon bone. But as Wang examined the pieces, perhaps out of scholarly habit or sheer curiosity, he noticed something remarkable. Etched symbols, tiny inscriptions carved into the surface of the bone fragments. He had seen nothing like them. These were not decorations. They were characters, ancient ones. Wang had unknowingly stumbled upon oracle bones, the remains of ox scapulae and turtle plastrons used in divination during the Shang Dynasty, around 1200 BC. The bones had been inscribed with the earliest known form of Chinese writing, and for years, decades even, these relics had been ground into powder, mixed into medicine, and consumed. This discovery sparked a flurry of archaeological activity. Sites at Anyang, the last capital of the Shang, revealed thousands of oracle bones, confirming not only the historicity of that dynasty, but also the deep spiritual significance attached to bone as a medium between worlds. But here's where the story begins to diverge. Not all dragon bones were oracle bones. Many of the bones still sold in apothecaries today, and even those used in ancient times, are now known to be fossils. Fragments of prehistoric animals preserved in stone. In fact, some of the dragon bones unearthed in antiquity have been identified by modern paleontologists as the remains of mammoths, rhinoceroses, stegodonts, and even early hominids. Yet, to those who gathered them centuries ago, they were unmistakably from dragons. This raises questions not only of interpretation, but of continuity. How did a prehistoric fossil, dug from the earth, with no frame of scientific reference, become integrated into a sophisticated medical system? And how did that belief survive, largely unchanged, into the modern era? Did early Chinese thinkers sense that these bones were extraordinary, even if they didn't understand their origins? Some believe so. In Taoist philosophy, dragons were more than myth. They were manifestations of energy, symbolic of transformation, mystery, and the power of nature. The bones of such a being, whether physical or metaphysical, would naturally be seen as imbued with potent force. Others suggest a more pragmatic explanation. Fossils were strange and rare. Their density, their pale color, and their durability set them apart from ordinary animal remains. Their presence deep within the mountains or embedded in cliffs only added to their mystique. Without modern paleontology, how else could they have been understood? Yet the use of dragon bones in medicine wasn't purely symbolic. Traditional Chinese texts are meticulous in their descriptions. Bones from a black dragon are better for calming the spirit. Bones from a white dragon help with nightmares. Powdered long gu was combined with other ingredients in formulas designed not just to heal the body, but to protect the soul from disturbance. And that, perhaps, is the most fascinating element of all. Were these formulas created through generations of observation, subtle patterns of efficacy that Western science has yet to fully explore? Or do they reflect a forgotten system of knowledge, one that combined empirical understanding with spiritual resonance? Today, dragon bones are still sold in some Chinese pharmacies, though regulations require that they be properly identified, usually as fossilized bones of herbivorous mammals. Still, in remote areas, locals occasionally uncover bones in the hills and bring them to market, insisting they came from where a dragon once flew. And here, the mystery deepens once again. Some paleontologists working in China's fossil-rich regions, such as Henan, Sichuan, and Yunnan, have documented ancient mining activity near fossil beds, dating back thousands of years. Could it be that early peoples recognized certain sites as sacred or special, not just because of legends, but because they sensed the presence of these ancient remains? Were they drawn to places of fossil density for reasons we no longer remember? Were the bones seen as gifts from the earth, or messages from creatures that existed before time? Or perhaps the deeper mystery is not about dragons, bones, or medicine, but about human perception itself. What is it about bone, fossilized, weathered, hidden deep, that calls to our sense of the ancient? What knowledge have we consumed without knowing? What wisdom lies buried beneath belief? The dragon bones have not vanished. They are still with us, in museum cases, in apothecary jars, in stories told on quiet mountain roads, silent remnants of a time when medicine and myth were not opposites, but partners in the search for truth. And somewhere between science and story, between fossil and fable, the dragon still waits. From the powdered bones of mythical dragons, ground into medicine, bridging past and present, we now turn our gaze toward the sea, to the blurred boundary between land and water, where stories have always taken on stranger shapes. Along the mist-veiled shores of ancient China, fishermen told tales of beings neither fully human nor wholly fish. Tales that drifted down rivers, whispered through ports, and found their way into the records of imperial scribes. These are the fishmen of the ancient texts. The earliest mentions come not from folklore, but from official historical documents, notably the Shanhai Jing, or Classic of Mountains and Seas, a compilation dating back to at least the 4th century BC. It is a cosmography, a mythical geography, and a record of strange creatures said to inhabit the edges of the known world. Among its many entries are descriptions of beings with human faces and fish bodies, or fish with the voices of men. Some are said to live in underwater cities. Others emerge from the sea to deliver messages, perform rituals, or even engage with ancient rulers. One passage speaks of a creature called the Jiaoren, flood people, or merfolk, who live in the South China Sea. They are said to weave the most delicate, water-resistant cloth known to humankind, crafted beneath the waves from mysterious threads. This cloth, known in later traditions as dragon silk, was so fine it was believed to resist fire. Astonishingly, these references appear in texts that also contain verifiable geographic details, suggesting the authors weren't simply inventing myths, but documenting what they believed to be real phenomena at the outermost limits of civilization. So what were they describing? Mainstream scholars typically interpret these passages through symbolic or allegorical lenses. Fishmen may have represented foreign peoples, island tribes with unfamiliar customs and clothing. Some propose the Jiaoren were inspired by diving communities, pearl harvesters or sponge divers whose extended time in the water gave them an aquatic mystique. If seen from a distance, cloaked in wet garments and moving through surf, could they have seemed otherworldly? Others point to the Bajau and Moken people of Southeast Asia, semi-nomadic groups often referred to as sea gypsies, who have adapted biologically to life in the water, including larger spleens for deep diving. Could the ancient Chinese have encountered similar populations and described them using the metaphors available at the time? And yet, some elements resist tidy explanation. In Han Dynasty records, for instance, there are reports of strange sea creatures being captured and brought to court, beings that resembled men but bore scales, who were said to understand human speech but did not speak themselves. In some versions, they wept silently, their tears forming pearls. Are these embellishments layered atop misunderstood sightings of marine animals, such as seals, dolphins, or dugongs? Possibly. But then, we have the remarkably consistent imagery across centuries. Humanoid figures with fish-like lower bodies, beings who live in structured societies beneath the sea, who interact, briefly and often mysteriously, with human rulers. In the Tang Dynasty, records mention a fisherman who caught a creature said to resemble a man from the waist up and a fish from the waist down. When brought ashore, the creature did not resist, but bowed 3 times and gestured toward the sea. The villagers returned it to the waves. For years afterward, they claimed their fishing fortunes improved. Was this myth, a moral tale, or a fragmented memory of a genuine encounter? In recent years, some fringe theorists have tried to connect the Chinese fishmen stories with similar beings in other ancient cultures, from the Babylonian Oannes, who emerged from the sea to teach civilization, to the Namo of the Dogon people in West Africa, who were described as amphibious. Even Greek tritons and mermaids bear echoes of these cross-cultural motifs. Is it coincidence that so many civilizations describe beings of the water, half human and half something else? Or are these collective memories, shared archetypes encoded in oral history? Or, as a few suggest more boldly, fragmented records of a forgotten chapter of evolution, where another lineage once walked, swam, beside us? There's little physical evidence to support such a claim. No bones, no artifacts, no proven contact. But the persistence of the narrative, and its presence in documents not otherwise known for fantasy, keeps the question alive. Further complicating the story are accounts of underwater palaces, described in detail in texts like the Yuyang Zazu from the Tang period. In one story, a man is said to have been taken by a fishman into the ocean depths, where he encountered an entire city, lit from within by glowing pearls. Time passed differently there. When he returned to the surface, only days had passed for him, but years had passed on land. Such as stories of fishmen dissolve into the depths of China's coastal folklore, we now turn inland, northward, toward the colder, wind-brushed frontiers of what is today Heilongjiang province, near the borderlands of Russia and the Korean peninsula. Here, in a vast expanse of dense coniferous forest, broken only by winding rivers and snow-covered mountains, a once formidable people thrived, and then vanished. This is the mystery of the Mohe. The Mohe were not a myth. Their existence is well documented in Chinese annals from the Tang Dynasty between the 7th and 10th centuries AD. They were a powerful Tungusic-speaking people related to the Jurchens, who would later give rise to the Manchu, founders of the Qing dynasty. But what makes the Mohe unusual isn't just their historical footprint. It's the silence that follows it. Their name appears abruptly in written records, sometimes as allies, sometimes as enemies. Described as formidable warriors, fur traders, and expert horsemen, the Mohe left behind no known written language of their own, no monumental ruins, no clear legacy in cultural or genetic records. And then, sometime between the 10th and 12th centuries, they simply disappear from history. Where did they go, and why does so little remain? Historical accounts, such as the Xintangshu and Jutangshu, the Old and New Histories of the Tang, note that the Mohe were divided into subgroups, such as the Heishui Mohe, who inhabited the upper reaches of the Amur River. Their society revolved around hunting, agriculture, and trade. They cultivated millet and raised pigs, and their warriors were feared for their skill in archery and their resilience in sub-zero conditions. Chinese chroniclers were both fascinated and wary of them. The Mohe were said to eat their meat raw, wear pelts of black bear, and build subterranean dwellings to survive the freezing winters, homes dug beneath the earth, heated by fire and sealed against the snow. And yet, despite this harsh and remote existence, they developed a complex relationship with surrounding powers. They fought with the Goguryeo and later engaged diplomatically with the Tang. For a time, they were a bridge between China, the Korean kingdoms, and the nomadic peoples of the north. Then, around the end of the 10th century, their name fades from the records, replaced by the Jurchen. Mainstream historians argue that the Mohe were gradually assimilated into the Jurchen tribes. The Jurchens rose to power quickly, founding the Jin dynasty in 1115 AD and waging war with the Song dynasty to the south. It is believed that the Mohe, especially the Heishui branch, merged into this rising force, losing their distinct identity in the process. But others point to gaps in this explanation. Linguistic traces of Mohe dialects remain unclassified. Archaeological remains in what is believed to be Mohe territory show a sudden break in material culture. Tools, pottery styles, and burial customs shift dramatically within the span of a generation. And there is no continuous settlement evidence that links Mohe sites directly to later Jurchen centers. Moreover, folk traditions among the Evenki and some Manchu-descended communities speak of an earlier people who walked with bears, who vanished into the forests when the stars changed. These tales speak of a migration, not of conquest, of departure, not defeat. Could it be that a portion of the Mohe retreated deeper into the wilderness, refusing to assimilate? Could they have migrated further north or east, disappearing into the dense taiga and tundra of Siberia? Some researchers have looked for genetic links among remote Tungusic groups, like the Ulchi or Nanai, but no conclusive markers have been found. In fact, genetic samples thought to be Mohe-related show surprising divergence from both Jurchen and later Manchu populations. And then there's the matter of the undeciphered petroglyphs found in the Sikote Alin mountain range, just beyond traditional Mohe territory. These carvings depict hunters with unusual headdresses, moose-like animals, and solar symbols unlike those associated with neighboring cultures. Some believe they may be remnants of Mohe shamanic practice. Others believe they belong to an even older, unknown group. But perhaps the greatest mystery of the Mohe isn't where they went, but why they were forgotten. Unlike the Jurchens, who built empires, or the Khitan, who carved their name into Chinese consciousness through warfare and diplomacy, the Mohe seem to have existed at the edges, essential, visible, and yet strangely unrecorded. Why would a people so prominent in military and trade affairs vanish so cleanly from both the written and material record? Could the erasure be political? An act of history rewritten by the victors? Or did the Mohe themselves choose to disappear? Culturally, spiritually, even geographically, leaving behind only whispers in the snow? Today, Mohe descendants, if any exist, are unrecognized as a distinct ethnic group. Their identity has been folded into the broader categories of Jurchen and Manchu. Yet among hunters in the northeast, there are still stories of a people who walked with the forest, who never built cities, but knew the paths of the stars and the migration of beasts. In this silence, in this absence, a haunting question remains. Are the Mohe truly gone? Or do they survive, not in monuments or maps, but in memory? In the cold wind that moves through the birch trees of the north, something lingers. A people once known by name, now known only by mystery. As the footsteps of the Mo faded into the northern forests, leaving behind more questions than traces, we turn now to a relic not of disappearance, but of disruption. A fragile artifact, inked with forgotten symbols, torn by time, and shrouded in silence. In a climate-controlled vault in the Arthur M. Sackler Gallery of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., preserved behind protective glass, lies one of the oldest known pieces of writing on silk, the Chu silk manuscript. A delicate ochre-colored scroll, measuring just over 50 centimeters long and 40 wide, the manuscript is believed to date back to the Warring States period, sometime around the 4th to 3rd century BC. It hails from the ancient Shu Kingdom, a southern power known for its distinct culture, mystical traditions, and a spiritual worldview often considered unorthodox by the northern states of early China. The scroll is written in archaic Chinese characters, many of which differ from later standardized forms. Painted in fine brushstrokes with dark ink on silk cloth, the manuscript is composed of astrological charts, ritual instructions, calendrical notations, and cosmological theories. It speaks of gods of the 4 directions, celestial cycles, and the management of time. But then, just as the narrative builds, it stops. Large portions of the text are missing. Not faded or damaged, but cut away, intentionally. Jagged edges suggest deliberate removal rather than the passive decay of age. At least 2 major segments, possibly chapters, have been lost, and no one knows why. Who removed them? When? And perhaps most intriguingly, what did those missing sections contain? The Chu silk manuscript first emerged onto the modern stage under unusual circumstances. It was smuggled out of China in the 1940s, appearing in Hong Kong's antiquities market before eventually being acquired by collector Arthur M. Sackler. Its early provenance remains unclear, and while most scholars agree it likely came from a tomb site, possibly in Changsha, Hunan, no excavation records exist. That mystery alone casts a long shadow over the document. Without context, no site, no accompanying artifacts, its meaning is partial, fragmented. But the intrigue deepens with the content itself. The manuscript references cosmic forces, the movement of deities, and a complex system of timekeeping rooted in both astronomy and ritual. Some passages resemble early Taoist thought. Others align more with shamanistic traditions known to have flourished in the Shu Kingdom, beliefs that viewed the universe as a living organism in need of ritual balance. In one surviving section, the manuscript warns of disturbing the spirits of the north during specific lunar phases. Another outlines the ritual purification of land before constructing an ancestral temple. The text implies that improper timing could lead to catastrophe, crop failure, disease, or the wrath of unseen entities. So what might have been in the missing parts? Scholars have speculated. Some believe the excised sections may have included politically dangerous material, rituals or cosmologies that diverged sharply from Confucian orthodoxy, making them targets for censorship during later dynasties. Others suspect the manuscript may have held forbidden knowledge, esoteric practices, or astrological predictions once deemed heretical or subversive. A more practical theory is that the scroll was looted and dismembered during illegal trade. The missing sections may simply have been sold separately, lost forever in the private vaults of collectors. But more speculative theories have emerged as well. Some suggest that the missing parts contained coded astronomical data, a sophisticated understanding of lunar and planetary cycles not seen again until much later. If true, it would imply the Chu culture possessed a level of celestial knowledge far beyond what mainstream history currently recognizes. Others point to the Chu's legendary interest in the afterlife. Ancient texts like the Zhuangzi refer to Chu sorcerers who could separate the soul from the body or speak across realms. Might the missing sections have detailed such techniques? Could the scroll have served as a ritual manual for guiding the dead or the living into altered states? And then there are those who speak of a more uncomfortable possibility. The cuts in the silk are jagged, uneven, rushed. Could someone, at some point in its long and wandering journey, have removed those sections to keep their contents hidden? What might a fragment of forbidden cosmology mean to a later ruler, scholar, or thief? A threat to doctrine? A map to a ritual best left forgotten? With the current manuscript's delicate condition, scientific testing is limited. Even high-resolution imaging has yielded few clues. There are no marginal notes, no impressions on the surrounding fabric, no ghostly ink left behind. Only the holes and the unanswered questions they leave. Today, the Chu silk manuscript is admired for its rarity. It represents one of the earliest windows into Chinese cosmological thinking. But its value lies not just in what remains, but in what's been taken away. Who wrote it? Why did they choose silk, a costly, impermanent medium, for knowledge so vital? Was it ever meant to survive? Was its fragmentation accidental or deliberate? And more pressingly, what truths did those missing sections once hold? As we peer through the glass at the fraying edge of this ancient scroll, we are left with a tantalizing thought that sometimes the greatest secrets of the past are not the things we can read, but the silences between the lines. From the frayed, silken threads of the Chu manuscript, silent in its omissions, we move now to something far more solid, yet no less enigmatic. Bronze. Cold, heavy, unyielding. Cast not only as vessels of ritual, but as canvases for something far older and far stranger. Among the most iconic artifacts of ancient China are the ritual bronzes of the Shang and Zhou dynasties, dating as far back as 1600 BC. Their forms are varied: cauldrons, wine vessels, water basins, and their purposes sacred. They were not made for daily use. They were offerings to ancestors, to spirits, to the unseen forces believed to govern heaven and earth. But it is not their function that has puzzled generations of scholars and archaeologists. It is what's on them. Staring out from the sides of these ancient bronzes, often centered, symmetrical, and unblinking, is a recurring image, one both abstract and alive. A pair of eyes, horns, fangs, sometimes framed by swirling patterns, sometimes emerging from the very geometry of the vessel itself. This is the Taotie, an ancient beast with no body, no limbs, no clear outline, just a face, distorted, devouring, and unknowable. In some renderings, it appears almost feline or bovine. In others, like an insect magnified or something entirely alien. It is always fragmented, seen straight on, as if looking into a mask or a mirror, never from the side, never in motion, as though fixed in place by the act of being watched. The term Taotie itself does not appear until much later, in texts from the Han Dynasty, nearly a millennium after the bronzes were made. There, it is described as a greedy, gluttonous monster, a warning against excess. But this later moralization doesn't explain its presence on sacred vessels, nor its consistency across hundreds of sites, from Anyang in Henan to the tombs of Sichuan. The question is as simple as it is unsettling. What is this face? Why did it matter so much to those who carved it into bronze again and again for centuries? Mainstream theories vary. Some suggest the Taotie is purely decorative, an evolution of earlier animal motifs, part of a visual language known as Leiwen or thunder pattern, meant to evoke power, symmetry, and order. Others believe it represents totemic spirits, ancestors or guardian deities taking partial animal forms, abstracted through generations of stylization. Another interpretation sees the Taotie as a ritual mask, a depiction of the shaman or priest transforming during rites of communion. Its distorted features, its empty gaze, may reflect the altered state of those who spoke with the dead. But none of these explanations fully account for the consistency of the motif, or the emotion it evokes. There's something off about the Taotie, something about its symmetry, its lack of context, the way it seems neither fully human nor fully beast. Art historian Casey Chang once described it as a deliberate embrace of ambiguity, a symbol not of clarity, but of threshold. More speculative voices have taken this further. Some propose that the Taotie was never meant to represent anything of this world, that it is instead a depiction of a spiritual force, one only partially glimpsed in ritual, impossible to render in full. Its missing body, its disjointed features, are not accidents of style, but reflections of metaphysical truth. Others, pushing further into fringe territory, have proposed that the image represents a visitation, an encounter with something unearthly. They point to the intensity of the eyes, the unnatural proportions, the eerie similarity between Taotie imagery and certain hallucinatory visions reported in shamanic trances across cultures. Could it be that the Taotie is a visual record of such an experience, something burned into collective memory? Perhaps the most tantalizing detail is that some Taotie bronzes were found in sealed tombs, alongside jade, bones, and oracle bones used in divination. These were not public art objects. They were instruments of communication, designed for use in ceremonies whose full nature we may never understand. In some tombs, bronze vessels were found with their Taotie faces turned inward toward the center of the burial chamber, as if watching, silently, in death. And there are layers still. Some bronzes depict multiple faces, 2, 4, or even 8 sets of eyes, stacked or mirrored in complex arrangements. In these cases, the Taotie seems less a creature and more a principle, a manifestation of watchfulness, of duality, or of something held just beyond the reach of language. Could it have been a symbol of the threshold between worlds, between the living and the dead, between form and formlessness? Or was it a kind of code, a sacred image passed down through secret traditions, its meaning lost over time, but its form preserved through reverence and fear? No ancient text explains the Taotie directly. No carving names it. No inscription tells us why the Shang kings chose to stare into its eyes during offerings of blood and wine, and yet its image remains, burnished into bronze, buried and unearthed, replicated with precision across centuries and distances. Who first drew this face? What did they see? And why does it still feel present. Perhaps, like the missing silk of the Chu manuscript, the Taotie is a message not meant to be read, but felt, a shape from the deep structure of ancient thought, a glimpse into a world where gods and beasts shared space and watched. Even now, in museums and tombs, behind glass and stone, the Taotie waits, its eyes fixed, its mouth open, its silence louder than words. And we are left to wonder, what exactly were our ancestors trying to remember or forget? From the cold metallic gaze of the Taotie, etched into bronze as if guarding secrets only the dead could decipher, we now shift toward something lighter in form, yet equally steeped in mystery. Shadows. Not cast by monuments or mountains, but by figures made of translucent skin, held aloft by bamboo rods and brought to life by flame. This is the world of ancient Chinese shadow puppetry, and more specifically, its most haunting variation, whispered of in folktales and hinted at in early chronicles, the shadow puppets of the dead. In dusty temple storage rooms across northern China, particularly in Shanxi and Gansu provinces, antique shadow puppets still survive. Delicate, jointed effigies cut from the hide of donkeys or oxen, dyed in vivid hues and perforated with intricate patterns. By day, they are inert, flat, curled relics of a bygone performance art. But at night, when placed behind a silk screen and lit by the flicker of a lantern, they awaken. They dance, speak, and vanish in silence. And for over 1,000 years, their stories have blurred the line between entertainment, ritual, and the unseen. Historically, Chinese shadow play is said to trace back as far as the Han Dynasty, around 121 BC, when legend tells of a grieving emperor who, desperate to reunite with his deceased concubine, commanded his court magicians to summon her spirit. According to the tale, they created a lifelike silhouette in her likeness and projected it onto a screen by firelight. The emperor watched in awe as her image moved once more. Whether myth or memory, the association between shadow puppetry and the afterlife was born. What followed was not merely theater, but something far more complex. During the Tang and Song dynasties, shadow puppetry evolved into a sophisticated art form with spiritual undercurrents. Performances were often held during funerals, in ancestral temples, or to appease restless spirits during ghost festivals. The puppeteers, many of them shamans or hereditary ritualists, were not merely entertainers. They were intermediaries. And here the mystery begins to deepen. In certain rural traditions, long considered fringe even by Chinese scholars, puppets were not created from ordinary materials. Instead, they were crafted, so it is said, from the hides of animals sacrificed in ritual, cured under moonlight, and inscribed with the names of the deceased. These were not toys, they were vessels. These effigies, sometimes called soul puppets, were used in performances that mimicked episodes from the deceased's life, journeys, feasts, disputes. But witnesses claimed that the puppets moved strangely, beyond the natural motion of rods and hands. They jerked, trembled. At times, as some oral accounts claim, they moved even when no one touched them. Could this be the embroidery of folklore? Of course, but across regions, separated by geography and dialect, similar stories persist. That certain puppets, once animated in a funeral rite, could never be used again. That to keep one in the home was to invite illness, misfortune, or dreams haunted by voices not one's own. That some puppeteers passed their craft only through bloodlines and warned never to perform outside sacred hours, lest the wrong spirit be summoned. And then there are the silent records, bundles of shadow puppets found in burial caches, particularly those unearthed from Tang-era tombs, where no theaters stood and no audience could ever watch. Some lie with ceremonial wine cups and incense. Others bear traces of cinnabar, used to preserve the dead and ward off demons. What were these puppets doing in the tombs? Some scholars suggest they were offerings, entertainment for the afterlife. Others theorize they served a ritual purpose during burial, helping guide the soul on its journey, reenacting moral lessons or cosmic myths. But the presence of puppets, shaped like known family members, elderly fathers, departed children, hints at something more personal, and possibly more unsettling. Was shadow puppetry once a form of necromancy? A way to briefly allow the soul to re-inhabit a material shape, to speak through image and movement. Historical texts are guarded on the subject. The Zhou Li, an ancient manual of rites, speaks cryptically of performers who channel the wind and call forth the likeness of memory. A Tang-era funerary tablet from Luoyang references a puppet ritual used to quiet the unrestful during an epidemic. But nowhere is the practice described in full. The truth, as with many ancient arts, lies half in shadow. Today, the tradition of shadow puppetry is a fading one, kept alive in folk festivals and museums. The bright, humorous plays performed for children seem worlds away from their ancestral function. Yet in certain corners of rural China, elders still tell tales of puppets that remember, of performances no one admits to attending, of figures that danced in the firelight long after the lanterns were blown out. Is it all superstition? A relic of grief? Or does it speak to a deeper understanding of how the living and the dead once coexisted, how the line between memory and presence was made visible, if only for a moment, in flickering silhouette? We may never know. But as the screen glows amber and the shadows begin to stir, we're left with a question that lingers, softly, like a breath behind silk. Whose stories were these puppets really telling, and who was watching from the other side? As the shadows of the puppet screen fade into silence, we move now into the open, into the stone and soil of a landscape that once echoed with the power of kings, rituals, and the whispers of ancestral gods. In the north-central plains of China, in present-day Henan province, lies the city of Anyang. At first glance, it's a modern sprawl of concrete and bustle, but buried beneath its streets, hidden among the rolling fields and winding rivers, lies one of the most significant archaeological sites in East Asia. The ruins of Yin, the last capital of the Shang Dynasty, dating back to around 1300 to 1046 BC. It was here that the earliest Chinese writing was discovered, oracle bones etched with divinations, records of war, sacrifice, and celestial observation. It was here that bronze vessels of unparalleled craftsmanship were unearthed, alongside chariots, jade, and the remains of human and animal offerings. But among the most visually arresting and least understood features of this ancient city are the giant face carvings found etched into cliffs, boulders, and stone blocks in and around the broader Anyang region. Often stylized, sometimes grotesque, and always imposing, these monumental stone visages do not resemble typical Shang-era art. They are large, some over a meter tall, deeply carved, and strangely symmetrical. Broad foreheads, circular staring eyes, gaping mouths. In certain cases, horns or fangs curl from the edges, echoing the Taotie motifs seen on bronze vessels, yet rendered with a rawness that suggests something far more primal. Many of these carvings were discovered not in temple ruins or palace walls, but on remote hillsides, facing outward, as though watching over the land or guarding invisible thresholds. And here the mystery begins. Who carved these faces? For what purpose? And why, even after decades of excavation, do we still have no definitive answer? Mainstream archaeology cautiously links the carvings to ritualistic or religious purposes. The Shang civilization, after all, was profoundly spiritual, its kings serving as high priests, its calendar aligned with lunar and solar cycles, its capital structured to reflect cosmic order. it's plausible that these faces were guardian figures, watchful spirits meant to ward off malevolent forces or to mark sacred ground. Others suggest they may be representations of deified ancestors, gigantic portraits of revered clan progenitors or mythic forebears. In this interpretation, the faces are not meant to be beautiful or even human, but overwhelming, abstracted expressions of power and remembrance. And yet, these explanations do not fully satisfy. Many of the faces bear no known writing, no surrounding iconography, and no consistent placement. Some are carved into isolated rock outcrops, far from any burial mound or settlement. Others are so weathered that their original context has been lost entirely. Furthermore, stylistic differences suggest they were carved over a long span of time, perhaps even before the Shang dynasty itself. Could they be remnants of an earlier culture, later incorporated into Shang religious life? Or were they created intentionally in primitive form to invoke a sense of the ancient or divine? More speculative theories abound. Some scholars, working on the edges of accepted history, propose that the faces reflect spirit beings seen during trance rituals, visualizations of deities or underworld guardians encountered by shamans. In this view, the crude symmetry and exaggeration are not flaws, but transcriptions of visionary experience, rendered into stone to preserve fleeting glimpses into other realms. Others wonder if the carvings served a protective astronomical function, aligned with celestial events, or positioned to mark solstices, eclipses, or planetary conjunctions. The eyes, in particular, have drawn attention. Wide, circular, often emphasized with deep grooves, could they have once been painted, inlaid, or used to track the sun's arc across the sky? And there are even stranger whispers. In local folklore, particularly among elderly villagers in outlying areas, there are stories, rarely written down, of the faces that watched. Tales speak of travelers who passed too close and dreamed of stone eyes following them, of farmers who avoided certain cliffs, believing the faces to be ancient gods or cursed kings, turned to stone as punishment or penance. A few accounts mention ceremonies long since abandoned, where offerings were left at the base of the carvings, not for celebration but for appeasement. Do these legends stem from psychological unease at the face's uncanny expressions? Or do they hint at a deeper memory, a time when these figures were not inert rock, but active participants in the spiritual life of the region? One particularly worn carving, unearthed partially during a hillside erosion event in the late 1990s, revealed something strange. Its eyes had been filled with black pigment, traces of which still remain. Whether the coloring was decorative or symbolic is unknown, but it forces a question. Were these faces once meant to be seen at night, lit by fire, their eyes glistening in the dark? As the archaeological community continues its patient work, no definitive interpretation has emerged. Some faces have been removed and preserved in museums. Others remain exposed, weathering slowly under wind and rain, their features growing more abstract with each passing season. They do not speak. They do not move. And yet they seem to demand attention. Perhaps the mystery of the Anyang face carvings is not simply in who carved them or why, but in the sensation they create. A visceral awareness of being watched. A quiet insistence that someone, long ago, wanted to be remembered, or to remember something no longer clear to us. Are they monuments? Guardians? Warnings? Or are they the silent echoes of a civilization reaching into stone to express what could not be written, fears and truths too vast for words? In the ancient earth of Anyang, beneath and beyond the oracle bones and royal tombs, the giant faces remain, unblinking, unyielding, waiting perhaps for someone to finally understand what they have been trying to say for over 3,000 years. From the chiseled faces of Anyang, silent, watchful sentinels of an ancient age, we ascend now into the realm of myth, a place not bound by walls or stone, but by the imagination of a civilization that looked skyward, seaward, and inward, searching for the origins of power, immortality, and divine order. We journey now to the 4 immortal mountains. Long before the first dynasties were carved into bamboo slips, before the bronze bells of ritual and the oracle bones of kings, ancient Chinese cosmology spoke of 4 sacred peaks, floating islands said to exist at the eastern edge of the world, beyond mortal reach. They were called Penglai, Fangzhong, Yingzhou, and Dayu. 4 mythic mountains said to drift atop the sea, buoyed by giant sea turtles, shrouded in mist and guarded by phoenixes and qilin. They were home to immortals, sages who had transcended death, and gods who knew the secrets of the cosmos. Atop these mountains grew trees of gold and jade, where peaches ripened only once every 3,000 years, fruit that could bestow eternal life. Waters from their springs healed any wound. Metals forged there never rusted. It was here, legend said, that the secrets of alchemical transformation, divine wisdom, and the art of living forever could be found. But where are these mountains? Were they ever meant to be real? Or are they reflections of something deeper, echoes of a prehistoric geography now lost to time? Classical texts such as the Shanhai Jing, the classic of mountains and seas, compiled as early as the 4th century BC, describe these places in stunning detail. The Immortal Mountains were said to be located in the eastern seas, just beyond the reach of human vessels. And yet, emperors tried. During the 3rd century BC, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of unified China, famously dispatched Shu Fu, a court magician, to sail east in search of Penglai and its elixirs. He was given ships, men, and a promise of great reward if he returned with immortality. But Shu Fu never came back. Some say he perished at sea. Others whisper he landed on distant shores, perhaps even in Japan, and became a god king among foreign peoples. And a few suggest something stranger still, that he found something and chose never to return. But what was he searching for? Were the Immortal Mountains mere metaphors, representations of spiritual transcendence? Or were they based on actual geographic memory, remnants of a forgotten land or prehistoric islands now lost beneath the sea? Curiously, across the eastern seaboard of China, there are scattered sites that bear names like Penglai Pavilion, Fangzhang Rock, or Yingzhou Temple, each claiming some echo or presence of these legendary places. At Mount Lao in Shandong Province, Taoist priests for centuries have held rituals said to open portals to the immortal realms. Visitors have reported dreams, visions, even unexplained shifts in time. Are these just products of faith and suggestion, or traces of a deeper connection between land and legend? Some archaeologists, taking a cautious approach, note the possibility of lost archipelagos, islands that once existed in the Yellow Sea or East China Sea, now submerged due to tectonic shifts or rising waters. Could early coastal peoples have preserved oral memories of these lands? Stories that later morphed into myths of floating mountains? Others look to the symbolic. 4 is a sacred number in Chinese cosmology, associated with the cardinal directions and balance. The Immortal Mountains may represent a spiritual map rather than a physical one, pillars holding up the heavens, like those described in early myths of the goddess Nuwa, who repaired the sky with colored stones. And yet, even among the speculative, one cannot ignore the strange consistency of the descriptions. Across centuries and regions, from Taoist scrolls to imperial records, the same details persist. Floating peaks, magical flora, immortal beings, and an unreachable eastern sea. How did such uniformity arise, unless the idea was seeded from a common source? Even in modern times, the mystery endures. In 1981, Chinese sailors off the coast of Liaoning reported seeing, just before dawn, a chain of peaks suspended above the ocean, glittering with strange light. Optical illusion? Atmospheric phenomenon? Perhaps. But those aboard described a sense of stillness, as if time had stopped. As with many ancient Chinese mysteries, the line between metaphor and memory remains blurred. Were the immortal mountains allegories for spiritual awakening, or fading memories of an ancient land now swallowed by the tides? Could the myth reflect a prehistoric migration route, one used by early shamans or priest kings, whose journeys were later deified? Or was it always a mirror, a symbolic realm conjured by a civilization trying to reconcile the transience of life with the desire for eternity? We may never know. But as the mists roll across the eastern horizon and the waves shimmer under the pale light of dawn, we're left to wonder, what if Penglai, Fangjiang, Yingzhou, and Daiyu were not meant to be found in space, but in time? Not places to reach with sails and maps, but with memory, ritual, and the strange alchemy of belief. Even now, the sea guards its secrets, and just beyond the edge of the known world, something waits. As legends of floating mountains drift into the mists of memory, we now turn our gaze westward, toward something far more solid, yet no less mysterious. Towering, austere, and impossibly remote, they have stood since before the first emperors drew breath. A wall of stone between earth and sky, a place the ancients did not merely respect, but feared. The Kunlun Mountains. Spanning over 3,000 kilometers across western China, this formidable range cuts through Xinjiang, Tibet, and Qinghai like the spine of the world. Snow-capped peaks pierce the heavens. Glacial rivers snake through high-altitude valleys, and few creatures dare roam these desolate, sacred heights. To modern geographers, the Kunlun Range is a vast and rugged landscape, one of Asia's longest mountain systems, formed by the slow collision of tectonic plates. But to the ancients, the Kunlun was something far more than a physical barrier. It was the axis mundi, the cosmic axis, the center of the world where heaven touched the earth. For thousands of years, the Kunlun Mountains were described not just in terms of geology, but of divine architecture. They were said to be the dwelling place of gods, immortals, and spirit beasts. The great Queen Mother of the West, Shi Huangmu, was said to rule from a palace of jade and gold deep within the range, surrounded by enchanted flora and beasts unseen by the mortal eye. In some of the earliest Chinese mythological texts, such as the Classic of Mountains and Seas, the Kunlun appears again and again as a gateway between worlds. But what kind of gateway? Ancient Taoist traditions held that within the Kunlun were portals, places where the boundary between this world and the next grew thin. It was believed that shamans and sages could access other planes of existence from these mountain passes, if they possessed the correct incantations or had undergone proper purification. This was not metaphor, but cosmological geography. The Kunlun was mapped as a central node in the universe, where the energies of the heavens, earth, and underworld converged. The Yellow River was believed to flow from its base, and the phoenix tree, the Fusang tree, and other mythical flora were rooted in its hidden groves. Was this all allegory? A spiritual landscape projected onto remote terrain? Or were ancient Chinese sages encoding something else? Perhaps even knowledge lost over millennia. Even today, certain ridges and gorges of the Kunlun remain shrouded in secrecy. Military access is restricted in key areas, satellite images show blurred zones, and local nomads share hushed tales of strange lights, inexplicable disappearances, and a hum that emanates from deep beneath the rock. What might lie beneath? Some researchers have posited that the region's extreme remoteness and low population density may hide geological anomalies, subsurface caverns, magnetic irregularities, or even seismic activity that creates unusual sensations in those who venture too close. These are grounded, scientific possibilities, and yet fringe theories take it further. Some believe the Kunlun Mountains conceal prehistoric technology, remnants of a forgotten high civilization. Others speak of energy vortexes, natural gateways into alternate dimensions, perhaps not unlike concepts found in other ancient cultures across the globe. Could the Kunlun Mountains be China's counterpart to the sacred peaks of the Andes or the pyramidal structures of Mesoamerica? Curiously, several UFO reports in China over the last few decades have emerged from areas adjacent to the Kunlun. The sightings describe craft that seem to disappear into the mountain mist or hover with unnatural stillness over snow-covered peaks. Again, explanations vary: meteorological phenomena, surveillance technology, misidentification, but the pattern is persistent enough to provoke questions. One of the most enduring mysteries is the tale of the Forbidden Zone of Kunlun, a valley allegedly near the Kunlun Pass where numerous explorers are said to have vanished without trace. Chinese media occasionally refers to it as a death valley, where compasses spin erratically and radio signals fail. Some accounts claim bodies have been found with expressions of terror but without any visible injuries. These stories, of course, are anecdotal, circulating through local folklore, fringe publications, and internet forums. But they echo a very old belief that the Kunlun is not just a place of physical challenge, but of spiritual danger. That it is sacred. And sacred places often guard their secrets with jealous intensity. What then are we left with? A mountain range that exists as much in myth as in map. A place once believed to be the dwelling of gods, the source of rivers, the root of immortality itself. A terrain of extreme beauty and desolation, layered with stories too old to trace. And yet, something about the Kunlun endures beyond poetic imagery. Perhaps it's the scale. Perhaps it's the silence. Or perhaps, just perhaps, there's something still there. A presence, a memory, a truth that hasn't yet been fully uncovered. Are the Kunlun Mountains simply a monument to ancient imagination? Or is there still something hidden within their shadows, something that once allowed mortals to touch the divine? The winds still howl across the peaks, the snow still buries the paths, and beneath the white silence, something waits. From the lofty heights of the Kunlun Mountains, where earth and heaven are said to meet, we descend now into the realm of written memory, where truths are captured not in stone or wind, but in ink and parchment. In a quiet chamber of the past, amidst dust-laden shelves and the faint scent of centuries-old woodblock ink, a singular tome once aimed to contain the sum of all known knowledge. Its name? The Sancai Tujing, the illustrated compendium of the three realms. Compiled during the late Ming Dynasty in the early 17th century, the Sancai Tujing was the monumental work of scholars Wang Qi and his son Wang Xi. An encyclopedic opus spanning hundreds of meticulously illustrated volumes, it sought to categorize the known universe into three realms: heaven, Tian, earth, Di, and man, Ren, a cosmic triad foundational to Chinese thought. Today, what remains of this encyclopedic vision is still staggering. With over 100 volumes preserved, the surviving work contains rich woodblock prints and detailed annotations on astronomy, geography, botany, zoology, mechanics, architecture, religion, and medicine. It is a breathtaking time capsule of Ming Dynasty intellect, deeply rooted in classical Chinese scholarship, yet also surprisingly global in its scope. There are maps of faraway lands, diagrams of mechanical inventions, and references to foreign peoples long before modern contact. Some entries describe Western technology with uncanny accuracy, long before such devices became common in China. Others depict constellations, mineral formations, and ancient tools whose origins remain ambiguous even today. But here's where the mystery begins. Early court records suggest that the original Sancai Tujing contained over 160 volumes, yet only about 105 have survived. What happened to the rest? Some scholars argue they were lost to time, consumed in palace fires, destroyed during periods of dynastic upheaval, or scattered when the Ming fell to the Qing. Others point to gaps in specific subjects, volumes rumored to contain unusual cosmographies, alchemical diagrams, or astronomical data drawn from obscure or now lost sources. Could it be that among the missing volumes were texts that challenged orthodoxy or included ideas too dangerous, too speculative, or too esoteric to preserve? A few records from Qing scholars hint at volumes describing stars not of this firmament, maps of inner continents beneath the oceans, and strange devices buried in the earth, of unknown origin but immense power. While these may be embellishments, they raise unsettling questions. One now missing entry, briefly mentioned in a Ming-era index, reportedly detailed a mechanical dragon said to have flown short distances using heat and pressure, a marvel that echoes other tales of automata lost to Chinese antiquity. Another absent section was said to describe the voice of the heavens, possibly a reference to sonic phenomena or even early experiments with resonance and frequency. Are these legends, creations of later imaginations, or tantalizing clues about knowledge once known and then forgotten? Intriguingly, some researchers believe that these missing volumes may still exist, hidden in private collections, locked within the archives of ancient families, or sealed in remote monastery libraries that have yet to be catalogued in the modern era. In 2012, a fragment from what appears to be an unknown volume of the Sancai Tujing surfaced in a private sale in Taiwan. It contained illustrations not found in any of the preserved volumes, depicting what seemed to be complex star charts arranged in a non-traditional grid system, and curious annotations about lunar shadows. Was it real, or a forgery, created to capitalize on the aura of the lost texts? No one knows for certain. The document vanished into a private collection before it could be thoroughly verified. Still, the implications stir the imagination. What if some of these lost volumes contained pre-Ming translations of older texts, scrolls dating back to the Han, the Zhou, or even earlier? What if fragments of Atlantean-like myths, alienation theories, or early parallel geography were embedded in the framework of classical Chinese thought, but stripped from the historical record when they became inconvenient? Even more grounded scholars admit there are simply too many unexplained voids. The surviving work contains cross-cultural references that suggest access to knowledge not commonly available during that era. Mentions of peculiar sea routes, unknown mechanical systems, and celestial bodies unseen to the naked eye all hint at a deeper, broader pool of information, much of it now just out of reach. Is it possible that the full Sancai Tujing once held a vision of the cosmos that merged myth, science, philosophy, and the supernatural into a unified tapestry? Something we're only beginning to glimpse again through modern quantum theory, multi-dimensional cosmology, and ancient comparative mythology? Or were its editors simply products of their time, drawing from tales, travelers, and rumors to construct a mosaic of wonder? Either way, the missing volumes remain a silent enigma, a puzzle box with empty spaces. They remind us that the archive of human knowledge is not complete, that even great civilizations have lost things, deliberately, carelessly or mysteriously. And so, we are left to wonder, what else might the Sancai Tujing have revealed? Had it remained whole? What fragments of wisdom have drifted beyond reach, like volumes swallowed by the sea of time, their pages unopened, their secrets unread? Somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten chamber, those answers still wait. From the fragile pages of lost encyclopedias, where knowledge vanishes between the margins of history, we turn to another silence, this one carved into the land itself. A place that once pulsed with imperial might, only to fall into shadow, its decline as swift as it was unexplained. Zhongdu, the western capital of the Jin Dynasty. Today, its remnants lie quietly beneath the modern city of Beijing, buried under layers of asphalt and time. Yet, 8 centuries ago, this city was one of the greatest power centers in northern China, an epicenter of political control, military strength, and cultural grandeur. Constructed in the 12th century by the Jurchen-led Jin Dynasty after their conquest of the northern Song, Zhongdu was more than a political seat. It was a statement of permanence, a declaration of dominion over the vast, contested northern plains. Its wide avenues, intricate canals, and soaring palace walls rivaled even the ancient capitals of Luoyang and Chang'an. Travelers wrote of its dazzling marketplaces and of towers that reached toward the sky. And then, barely a century later, it was gone. What could cause a capital city to vanish so quickly from prominence, from purpose, and from memory? The official story, found in historical records, is one of war and conquest. In 1215, the Mongol forces of Genghis Khan laid siege to Zhongdu, surrounding it in a brutal campaign that lasted months. Starvation gripped the population. Fires tore through entire districts. When the walls fell, the city was consumed, its buildings reduced to ash, its citizens slaughtered or scattered. It was, in historical terms, a catastrophic but explainable defeat, one of many during the relentless Mongol expansion. And yet, something doesn't quite add up. Contemporary accounts, both Chinese and foreign, mention strange preludes to the city's fall. Writings from Jin officials and local scholars hint at internal unrest, sudden disappearances, and omens in the sky seen months before the Mongols arrived. One document speaks of earth that opened without tremor, swallowing whole storehouses overnight. Another describes a sky fire that burned without smoke, possibly meteoric, possibly something else. A handful of surviving palace logs refer to an urgent effort to relocate archives and relics before the siege ever began. Some believe this was precautionary. Others suggest it was a response to something more cryptic, knowledge that the city was already doomed by forces less tangible than the Mongol army. Could Zhongdu's fall have been accelerated by internal sabotage, or the collapse of structural foundations weakened by rushed construction and overambitious planning? Or was there something more elusive at work, something that even contemporary historians hesitated to name? Centuries later, when Qing-era excavators began unearthing parts of the old city, they found more questions than answers. Large underground chambers, filled with rubble but showing signs of precise stone-cutting techniques unfamiliar even to experts of the time. A few stone tablets bore scripts not native to the Jin court, resembling more ancient Tungusic or even pre-Chinese glyphs. Who carved them? Some believe these markings connect Zhongdu to a far older cultural substratum, possibly from nomadic or tribal groups long assimilated or erased. Others suggest that Zhongdu was built atop a much older site, whose history was never fully understood by its Jin architects. Even stranger are the urban voids discovered beneath modern-day Beijing. subterranean tunnels and forgotten cisterns that don't appear in any surviving Jin records. Were they part of the capital's infrastructure? Emergency escape routes? Ritual chambers? In 2005, construction workers accidentally opened a sealed chamber beneath Beijing's Xinjiang district. Inside were fragments of what appeared to be elaborate jade fittings, ceremonial weapons, and organic remains, burned but deliberately arranged. The chamber was quickly resealed, and details of the find were never formally published. What were they trying to hide? Fringe theorists speculate that Zhongdu's destruction was not simply the result of military conquest, but the culmination of a deeper unraveling. Some propose that esoteric practices within the Jin court, rituals drawn from earlier shamanic or Taoist traditions, may have gone awry, unbalancing the harmony of the city itself. Could the Jin elite have been meddling with forces they didn't fully understand, seeking to control fate or divine protection only to unleash calamity? Of course, mainstream historians caution against reading too much into scattered anomalies. The fall of Zhongdu, they say, was tragic, but not mysterious. A casualty of war, politics, and the inevitable march of empire. Still, the silence is telling. Little remains of Zhongdu today. The outer city walls lie hidden beneath Beijing's grid. The central palace district, once adorned with lacquered pillars and golden eaves, now sleeps beneath modern shopping districts and apartment towers. And yet, something stirs in the silence. A city doesn't simply disappear, not entirely. Echoes remain, in brick, in story, in the very soil. So we ask, did the Jin dynasty's western capital fall solely by sword and flame? Or did it crumble under the weight of secrets too great to bear? Perhaps, somewhere beneath the pavement, in forgotten corners of the old imperial ground, the truth still lingers, waiting for the moment it will be uncovered once more. As the last embers of Zhongdu flicker into the shadows of history, we turn not toward ruins or buried stone, but toward something less tangible, a being that exists in whispers, in parchment, in dreams. A creature both feared and revered. It does not dwell in capitals or halls of power, but in the borderlands of belief. It is known by many names, across many centuries, but in China it is called Hulijing, the nine-tailed fox. High in the mist-veiled mountains of Qinghai, among pine forests so ancient their roots wrap around forgotten shrines, stories persist of a fox with shimmering white fur and eyes like molten gold. Locals say it appears only at twilight, vanishing before its full form can be seen. Yet in the silence it leaves behind, there lingers a sensation of presence, of intelligence, of something not entirely of this world. What is the nine-tailed fox? In its simplest form, it is a mythical creature from Chinese folklore, a fox spirit that, upon living for 1,000 years, grows 9 tails and attains immense power, often capable of shape-shifting into human form. It first appears in recorded Chinese literature as early as the 4th century BC, in texts like the Shanhaijing, the classic of mountains and seas, where it is described as an omen-bearing beast, both auspicious and dangerous. But the legend does not remain static. Over centuries, the nine-tailed fox evolves. In the Han Dynasty, it is associated with fertility and the divine feminine, often appearing as a celestial creature of grace. Later, during the Tang and Song dynasties, its image darkens, becoming a seductress, a manipulator of men, a harbinger of political instability. In some stories, it is a spirit of vengeance. In others, a wise and lonely guardian of ancient truths. Why this shift? Some scholars argue the changing character of the nine-tailed fox reflects societal anxieties, particularly those around powerful women, shifting dynasties, and foreign influence. In times of peace, the fox is beautiful and benevolent. In times of upheaval, it becomes monstrous. And yet, the nine-tailed fox refuses to be fully explained away. Historical records from various dynasties include odd accounts, not myths but documents presented in court, of fox-like beings infiltrating human society. One record from the later Zhou period describes a woman of unearthly charm who vanished after her residence was searched, leaving behind only white fur and an overwhelming fragrance of sandalwood. Another tale, dated to the Tang court, tells of an advisor who claimed to receive nightly visions from a nine-tailed entity that taught him complex philosophical diagrams. His ideas were dismissed, but strangely, some of those same patterns appear centuries later in Taoist alchemical scrolls, origin unknown. Could these just be metaphors? Or did the ancient world experience something else? In Korean and Japanese traditions, where the creature is known as gumiho and kitsune respectively, similar legends abound. The consistency of the myth across East Asia, despite cultural differences, raises a compelling question. Is there a shared archetype beneath the surface? Or could these stories stem from real, unexplained encounters? Biologically, no such creature has ever been verified. But then again, the nine-tailed fox has never claimed to belong fully to the natural world. It slips between dimensions, symbolic, spiritual, psychological. Some folklorists suggest the nine-tailed fox represents liminal energy, the border between wild and civilized, between human and animal, between reality and dream. In this light, the creature is not evil or good, but a mirror, reflecting back what we bring into the encounter. More esoteric theories suggest something even stranger. Could the nine-tailed fox be a residual memory, an echo of a once-living species, now extinct or transformed beyond recognition? Or a manifestation of consciousness, summoned through collective belief, akin to the Tibetan concept of a tulpa? There are those who point to unusual sightings, even in modern times, of foxes larger than nature should allow, with unusual behaviors or strange lights accompanying their appearance. In 1983, a remote village in Henan reported a week-long series of phantom lights and livestock disruptions, culminating in the sighting of what witnesses described as a fox with feathers of fire leaping across rooftops. The reports were never explained. Still others suggest that the nine-tailed fox is a cipher for celestial intelligence, a being not born of Earth but watching it. A guardian, perhaps, or something far more ancient. Throughout Chinese mythology, 9 is a number of power. It is the number of the emperor, of dragons, of completeness. That the fox is granted 9 tails is not incidental. It places the creature near divinity. Could it be that ancient peoples intuited this fox as a symbol of encoded knowledge? A living riddle? Modern psychology might call it a projection, an anthropomorphized force expressing unconscious fears or desires. But that, too, leaves something unsaid. Why does the nine-tailed fox persist? Why does it continue to haunt poetry, dreams, cave murals, opera masks, and yes, even modern films and games, thousands of years after it was first imagined? Perhaps it is not just a tale, but a threshold, not of fur and fang, but of meaning, a shimmering veil across time and consciousness. So we ask, what lies behind the eyes of the nine-tailed fox? Is it merely our imagination staring back at us? Or something far older, far more real, and still watching from the shadows of the world? Even now, in moonlit forests and the fading ink of ancient scrolls, it waits. A mystery not yet ready to reveal its final form. From the flickering illusions of the nine-tailed fox, an entity of smoke, shape, and shadow, we descend into the tangible yet no less mysterious. Objects that do not vanish, but reflect. That capture not just the face, but perhaps something more. To behold one is to encounter a paradox. Smooth on one side, polished to a faint glow like watered silk, ornate on the reverse, inscribed with dragons, phoenixes, cosmic symbols, and invocations to light and virtue. They shimmer with a beauty that is both functional and symbolic, both personal and imperial. And yet, some of these mirrors, particularly those recovered from the Han Dynasty tombs, seem to do more than reflect. They reveal. A number of these ancient mirrors, when placed under strong sunlight and projected against a wall, appear to cast the pattern on their backs through their solid, reflective face. In other words, the design on the reverse becomes visible in the mirror's light beam, as though the bronze itself is somehow transparent to energy. How? Modern metallurgists have puzzled over this for decades. The phenomenon, now called the magic mirror effect, was first recorded in the West in the 19th century by British scientist William Bragg, but had been observed in China centuries earlier. One Tang Dynasty text describes a divine mirror, which sends the image of the dragon into the air, though none is etched upon its face. To this day, there is no fully agreed-upon explanation for how these mirrors project their designs. Some theorists point to the subtly varied thickness of the bronze during casting, imperceptible to the eye but creating micro-deformations during polishing. These deformations scatter light in such a way that the back's pattern becomes embedded in the mirror's surface at a microscopic level. And yet, not all mirrors exhibit this effect, only a select few. Many of these rare mirrors are crafted with stunning precision, far beyond what ancient metallurgy was assumed to be capable of. The alloy is usually a mix of copper, tin, and lead, but in proportions so finely tuned that even slight deviations would ruin the mirror's performance. Some show traces of mercury, perhaps used in polishing or perhaps for something else. A number of magic mirrors were recovered from imperial tombs, notably those of high-ranking Han nobles. Others were buried with scholars or mystics, raising the question, were these mirrors mere status symbols or ritual tools? The symbolism in their engraved backs is dense, layered, and astrological. Circles within circles, 8 trigrams, celestial animals, inscriptions invoking harmony between heaven and man. Were they used for divination? For communication with the spirit world? Or, as some fringe theorists suggest, for something more technological? One theory posits that these mirrors were early optical devices, used not just for reflection but to direct light in meaningful ways, possibly in temples or burial rituals. Could they have been part of sunlight rituals, projecting images onto walls or bodies during sacred ceremonies? A few Taoist texts hint at mirrors that could reveal a person's soul or reflect the true form of a being. The philosopher Zhuangzi wrote of a mirror so clear that even heaven would lean to gaze within it. Was this metaphor or memory? In a fascinating twist, some mirrors have been found to ring like bells when struck gently, vibrating with a pure tone that suggests precision casting and a keen awareness of harmonic resonance. Is it possible that the mirrors of ancient China were part of a multisensory ritual technology? Sight, sound, light, reflection. Even more provocative is their connection to the cosmos. The recurring appearance of astronomical symbols, including depictions of the Big Dipper, lunar phases, and planetary alignments, suggests these were not idle decorations. In Chinese cosmology, mirrors were believed to repel evil and connect realms, heaven, earth, and the underworld. So were these mirrors spiritual gateways? Portals in polished bronze? It's tempting to romanticize, yet the craftsmanship is real. The optical effects measurable, the knowledge undeniable. But the questions remain. Why were so few of these mirrors made? Why do only certain ones project the magic mirror effect, while others, though nearly identical in form and age, do not. Were the secrets of their creation deliberately hidden, passed only from master to disciple, or lost entirely when dynasties fell and tombs were sealed? Recent scientific efforts have managed to replicate the effect using modern tools, but even then, only with great effort and precision. How did craftsmen over 2,000 years ago achieve the same result? By hand. And if they understood how light could be bent, projected, encoded, what else might they have known? One mirror, recovered from Hunan province, bears an inscription. The heart that sees truth is clearer than any reflection. A poetic sentiment, or a deeper clue. We may never know. Perhaps these mirrors were never meant to answer questions, only to invite them. So we ask, when you gaze into an ancient mirror, what stares back? Is it your own reflection, or the echo of a civilization that understood light and meaning in ways we have yet to remember? Somewhere in the quiet corridors of a museum, or the sealed silence of a tomb, the last of the ancient mirrors waits, its surface calm, its truth still hidden beneath the light. From the smooth, light-bending surfaces of the ancient mirrors, we move deeper into the metalwork of early Chinese civilization, into something more lifelike, more imposing, and infinitely more unsettling. They stand rigid, yet eerily present, silent sentinels forged not from stone or clay, but metal, bronze, copper, and iron, crafted with an intensity of detail that is, even now, difficult to ignore. The coppermen of the Han Dynasty, some call them statues, others call them machines, and some, simply, anomalies. The most well-documented account comes from Han Dynasty texts, notably during the reign of Emperor Wu of Han, r. 141-87 BC, one of China's most ambitious and cosmically inclined rulers. Within his sprawling palatial complexes and ritual spaces, there were said to be 12 life-sized copper men, cast in full armor, with weapons in hand, their bodies inscribed with writings of celestial importance. Descriptions of these figures are found in early historical records, such as the Book of Han, where they are described as standing tall and solemn in the imperial court, serving as both military symbols and repositories of knowledge. But were they merely ceremonial or something more? Modern archaeologists have recovered only fragments, oxidized limbs, decorative motifs, iron casings scorched by time. Some remnants suggest these were not hollow shells, but dense, intricately cast forms, filled with complex internal supports. A few reports even describe traces of movable joints, hinting at articulation. What purpose could statues like these serve? Were they guardians, placed to watch over sacred texts, secrets of the heavens, or the gates of the emperor's afterlife? Or could they have held a mechanical function? This is where the mystery begins to deepen. Some Han-era texts suggest that Emperor Wu commissioned not only symbolic works, but also functional automata, figures that could move, gesture, or even produce sound. One poem from the Huainanzi, a philosophical work of the time, hints at men of bronze who shout warnings at the wind, and guardians whose eyes shine in darkness. Are these poetic metaphors, or distorted memories of an ancient innovation now lost? The Han court was known to employ engineers, alchemists, and natural philosophers, many of whom dabbled in what we might call proto-science. One figure in particular stands out, Zhang Heng, an inventor and astronomer credited with building an earthquake detector that could identify distant seismic activity using a series of weighted bronze balls and mechanical dragons. If such complexity was possible during that era, could the copper men have been more than statues? Some fringe theorists speculate that they may have functioned like early training dummies or demonstration tools, designed to showcase armor techniques or celestial knowledge. Others propose that they could have served as interactive ritual objects, activated during ceremonies through fire, water, or pressure. Even more speculative are accounts found in later Taoist alchemical texts, describing metal men who hold the secrets of the constellations and guard the immortal paths. Were these inspired by the Han statues, or part of the same esoteric tradition? There's also the question of their disappearance. By the end of the Han Dynasty, the Copper Men had vanished from official records. No clear documentation explains whether they were dismantled, hidden, or melted down for war. Some believe they were buried with the emperor, or worse, destroyed during later dynastic purges, which often targeted anything deemed heretical or too closely tied to heaven's secrets. But tantalizing fragments persist. In 1983, during renovations near Xi'an, fragments of a large copper torso were uncovered, its surface covered in faint celestial etchings. Nearby were remnants of scorched earth and melted alloy, suggesting either ritual cremation or destruction by fire. The artifact bore uncanny similarities to the accounts of the Copper Men. And in 2002, during an excavation in Hubei province, archaeologists uncovered copper figurines with articulated limbs, smaller than life-size, but possessing joint structures similar to modern action models. These were buried in a workshop near a once grand estate, dating back to the late Western Han. Coincidence? Or a glimpse into a lost workshop of the Copper Men? What remains unclear is the true intent behind these figures. Were they military propaganda, iron-bodied emblems of strength and invincibility? Or were they esoteric instruments, devices of knowledge transmission, coated in metal? The Han Dynasty, after all, believed in a cosmic mandate, that the emperor ruled not by birthright, but by celestial approval. Every object in the court carried layers of meaning. A mirror might reflect the soul. A statue might hold the stars. If the Copper Men embodied knowledge, might their inscriptions, many of which are now lost or eroded, have carried scientific or astronomical information encoded in symbolic form? Could they have functioned like ancient memory systems, preserving complex data in a pre-literate, visual language? Or perhaps they were just guardians, silent and heavy, placed to terrify or inspire. A reflection not of heaven, but of human ambition. We may never know. The Copper Men remain largely absent from museum shelves. Their bodies fragmented, their purpose debated, their voices, if they ever had them, long silent. But the question lingers. Were these statues merely bronze effigies of military might? Or did they once move, however subtly, with the breath of ancient ingenuity? What secrets did they carry in their cold copper veins? And more haunting still, could they have been watching, not just the emperor, but us? The mystery of the Copper Men endures, silent, patient, and unfinished. Somewhere beneath layers of earth or forgotten within sealed tombs, they may still be standing, waiting. As the metallic silence of the Copper Men fades into history, our attention turns toward the earth once again, to a quieter, older enigma nestled in the lush valleys of central China. A civilization that left behind no great walls, no towering statues, only fragments, impressions, and questions. Welcome to the world of the Daxi culture. Stretching along the middle reaches of the Yangtze River, near what is today Hubei and Hunan provinces, the land once occupied by the Daxi is fertile and green, laced with winding rivers and mist-covered hills. It is a landscape of abundance, where ancient people hunted, fished, farmed, and evidently thrived. Yet for all their success, the Daxi people, who lived from approximately 5,000 to 3,000 BC, seem to have simply vanished, without conquest, without fire, without burial mounds filled with kings. Their disappearance, like a shadow slipping into dusk, remains one of early China's most perplexing puzzles. Who were they, and why did they fade so suddenly? Archaeologists first uncovered traces of the Daxi in the 1920s, but more significant findings came decades later with the excavation of sites like Daxi and Kujialing. The Daxi were skilled potters, known for their fine red and black ceramics, many of which were incised with unique decorative patterns, evidence of both aesthetic taste and cultural cohesion. Their pottery often included intricate spirals, fish motifs, and bird shapes, pointing to a deep connection with nature, and perhaps something more symbolic. They lived in semi-subterranean homes, practiced rice agriculture, and appear to have maintained extensive trade networks, with artifacts showing connections stretching far across prehistoric China. Stone tools, jade ornaments, and woven textiles speak to a society that was not primitive, but organized, refined. And yet, around 3000 BC, the Daxi sites go quiet. The pottery ceases. Settlements dwindle. Cultural signatures vanish from the archaeological record. So what happened? Mainstream scholars point to environmental change. There is some evidence to suggest that flooding of the Yangtze River, possibly tied to monsoon variability or early deforestation, disrupted agricultural productivity. In a civilization so closely tied to river systems, a prolonged period of inundation or crop failure could have triggered migration or societal breakdown. Others suggest conflict or assimilation, that neighboring cultures, such as the emerging Kujialing or Liangzhu cultures, absorbed or displaced the Daxi. But if this was the case, where are the transitional layers? Why is the shift so abrupt, so complete? Some researchers propose the Daxi didn't vanish, but transformed, their descendants becoming the bedrock of later regional groups. Yet this theory struggles to explain the distinct stylistic and technological discontinuities in the archaeological record. And then, there are the stranger ideas. A few fringe theorists suggest the Daxi had access to lost knowledge, astronomical or spiritual systems passed down from a forgotten lineage of ancient sages, or even, as one early 20th century folklorist proposed, sky people. These ideas stem in part from the symbolism found on Daxi pottery, which some interpret as early cosmological diagrams. Spirals arranged in trios, star-like symbols, fish with exaggerated eyes pointed to the heavens. Is this simply art, or encrypted meaning? Local legends from the region sometimes speak of river ancestors who came from the mist, taught farming and carving, and left again without a trace. Could these tales be fading echoes of the Daxi? Of course, such theories tread a fine line between poetic mythology and historical inquiry. But in the absence of clear answers, the mystery remains open. Intriguingly, one Daxi site revealed the remains of an individual buried with unusual precision, surrounded not by wealth, but by tools arranged symmetrically, as if part of a ritual or code. Scholars remain divided. Was this a shaman, a craftsman, or something else entirely? Another point of curiosity lies in the Daxi's sudden mastery of rice cultivation. The Yangtze region is considered one of the earliest centers of rice domestication, and the Daxi played a role in spreading this knowledge. But how did a society with such agricultural sophistication collapse so completely, leaving no clear cultural descendants? Why do their settlements disappear without clear signs of invasion or slow decline? Is it possible the Daxi culture represents an evolutionary branch in early Chinese civilization, one that rose quickly, flourished, and then, for reasons unknown, died out before it could leave a larger genetic or cultural imprint? Or were they, like so many early societies, victims of nature's whims, Caught in a moment of ecological fragility, we are only now beginning to understand. What survives of them are broken pots, stone tools, and subtle soil stains, a language of absence, of interrupted lives. And in that absence, a void remains, one that archaeologists, historians, and even storytellers continue to peer into. Perhaps somewhere, beneath the river silt or hidden beneath forest roots, more of the Daxi story waits to be uncovered. Or perhaps the greatest clues have already been found, scratched into the side of a ceramic bowl, overlooked, untranslated. Why did the Daxi vanish so completely? Did they leave? Or were they erased? The past does not always disappear loudly. Sometimes it simply slips beneath the current. And still, we wonder, what else lies buried in the valley of the Yangtze, waiting to return to the light? The Yangtze Valley holds the silence of those who vanished. But not all mysteries are rooted in loss. Some are born from stories that refuse to disappear. Tales passed down for centuries, through ink, brush, and voice, until they became something more than myth. They became memory. They became belief. We now journey from riverbanks to the open sea, to a place between realms, where gods and mortals meet in stories that defy time. This is the legend of the 8 immortals crossing the sea. The sea in question is often imagined as the Bohai Gulf or the East China Sea, its surface shimmering under sun or starlight, stretching endlessly into the mist. A liminal space, wide, unknowable, and sacred. Along its coasts, from the Shandong Peninsula to the shores of Zhongshan, travelers still speak of ancient powers stirring in the waves. The 8 immortals, Ba Xian in Chinese lore, are not just legendary figures. They are symbols of transcendence. Each represents a different condition of human life: wealth and poverty, youth and age, male and female, scholarly and martial. First recorded in the Ming Dynasty, though likely older in origin, their story resonates with Taoist cosmology and popular folklore. Unlike remote deities of heaven, the 8 immortals walk among people. They drink wine, they argue, they laugh, they suffer. And, most curiously, they each possess a unique object, called a faki, or magical tool, used to cross the sea in a display of individual power and harmony with the universe. But why the sea? And why cross it? The most enduring version of the tale tells of the immortals deciding to traverse the great expanse not by traditional means, not in a boat, but by channeling their spiritual powers through their own tools. A fan, a sword, a lotus flower. Each immortal turns an everyday object into a vehicle of divine movement, challenging the limitations of both man and nature. It is said they did this not to prove strength, but to demonstrate something deeper, that enlightenment, when fully realized, could shape the physical world. But what does this legend conceal? Some historians believe the tale reflects actual maritime expeditions undertaken during the Ming Dynasty, perhaps allegorical references to naval missions or spiritual pilgrimages to sacred islands like Mount Penglai, long thought to be the home of immortals. Could the crossing of the sea point to a real voyage? A forgotten expedition lost to storms or memory, cloaked in myth for protection or reverence? In ancient Chinese geography, the sea is more than water. It is the threshold between this world and the next. To cross it without a vessel was to master the forces of nature, time, and death. Archaeological evidence from coastal Shandong shows temples, shrines, and inscriptions dedicated to the 8 immortals dating back hundreds of years. Carvings of their faces line grottos. Their stories are painted across temple beams. Even today, fishermen leave offerings in hopes of calm seas and safe returns. But perhaps the most tantalizing hint of deeper truth lies in their number. 8. The number is not random. It holds symbolic power in Chinese cosmology. The Bagua, or 8 trigrams, are central to Taoist metaphysics, mapping the balance of forces in the universe: heaven, earth, water, fire, wind, thunder, mountain, and lake. Some have drawn connections between the 8 immortals and these elemental forces. Could the story of their sea crossing be an esoteric code? A spiritual formula disguised as folklore? And then, there are the strange parallels. In texts from the Tang and Song dynasties, we find references to otherworldly beings who traveled across seas without ships, bearing tokens that glowed or transformed. In Taoist alchemical traditions, such tokens were tools of transformation, keys to immortality. Are we dealing with stories or remnants of a once-living mystical tradition? More fringe theorists suggest the tale preserves knowledge of advanced ancient technologies, perhaps even levitation, manipulation of matter, or access to natural energies we no longer understand. The descriptions of objects, Lu Dongbin's sword, He Xianggu's lotus flower, take on new meaning when viewed through that speculative lens. Devices of power? Artifacts of a lost science? It's worth noting, the 8 immortals did not cross the sea in unity. Each used their own method, suggesting individuality within transcendence. Could this be a metaphor for different paths to the same spiritual destination? Or is it a cultural echo of an ancient practice, each practitioner developing their own technique to pierce the boundary between worlds? The motif of the sea crossing appears in other traditions too, from Indian yogis said to travel across water through meditation, to early Taoist masters said to vanish into the mist at the edge of the ocean. In Chinese tradition, the sea is a veil, a mirror. To cross it is to pass into myth, into legend, or into understanding. And so, from legends that sail across oceans to mysteries buried in the earth, China's ancient past is woven with threads both celestial and subterranean. And while some stories drift in mythic skies, others remain anchored in tombs, waiting silently beneath layers of time, guarded by silence, sealed by soil. We now descend into the cryptic world of the Chu burial songs, melodies not heard in over 2,000 years, written not for celebration but for passage. Buried deep beneath the earth in the heart of ancient Chu territory, what is now modern-day Hubei and Hunan provinces, lie tombs unlike any others in China. These were not simple resting places. They were realms unto themselves, lavishly constructed, elaborately decorated, and designed with almost theatrical care. The burial chambers of the Chu people evoke a civilization that believed the boundary between life and death was porous, and perhaps negotiable. And within these tombs, sometimes inscribed on silk, sometimes hinted at through objects, lie references to songs of farewell, songs of remembrance, songs of departure. But what were these burial songs? Why did the ancient Chu people sing to the dead? Archaeological discoveries at sites like Baoshan, Juliandun, and Tomb No. 1 at Mawangdui have uncovered a rich tapestry of Chu funerary culture. From silk books to lacquered coffins, from ritual bronzes to celestial charts, these tombs overflow with symbolic language. Among the most compelling finds are references to musical instruments, lyrics, and ritual texts, suggesting the dead were accompanied into the afterlife not just by material goods, but by carefully composed melodies. In one tomb, a set of bronze bells, perfectly tuned, was found resting near the corpse. In another, zithers and flutes, arranged with meticulous care. Inscriptions found nearby describe processional hymns and spirit-summoning verses. It appears that for the people of Chu, music was not an accessory. It was a vehicle, a bridge between worlds. But what did these songs sound like? No complete musical notation survives. The Chu language, though related to classical Chinese, was deeply poetic, full of metaphors and regional idioms. Fragments of texts believed to be funeral chants contain strange, repetitive imagery. Black birds flying west, mist that speaks, wind that remembers names. Were these coded instructions for the dead? Messages to the gods? Or something else? Some historians interpret them as early expressions of shamanic ritual. The Chu state, after all, was known for its deep spiritual traditions, more animistic and ecstatic than the sober rites of the Zhou. Ancient texts like the Zhuangzi describe Chu shamans who danced into trance states, calling down thunder and summoning rain. Could these burial songs have been performed as part of such ecstatic ceremonies, sung by priests who believed their voices could pierce the veil between the living and the departed? Others offer a more grounded theory. Perhaps the songs served as mnemonic devices, helping mourners recite sacred genealogies, mythic histories, or cosmological truths. The repetition and rhythm would preserve memory. The music would immortalize identity. But there are more speculative interpretations as well. Some fringe theorists, pointing to the unusual frequencies of the bronze bells and the precise acoustic design of certain Chu tombs, suggest the possibility of sound being used as a spiritual technology, not merely for communication, but for transformation. Could specific tones have been believed to activate aspects of the soul? To open invisible gates? Could sound itself have been the medium through which the deceased traveled to the next world? There is also the curious link to celestial navigation. The Chu burial texts often describe a journey to the stars. In one poem, the soul is urged to follow the river to the sky. In another, the dead are advised to board the dragon that ascends with the sun. Such phrases have been interpreted both symbolically and literally. Some believe these were instructions for spiritual ascent. Others wonder, could they reflect lost knowledge of the stars? Star maps embedded in song? Still more puzzling are references to echoes that return no sound, and songs that wake the silent stone. Are these metaphors for grief? Or hints of deeper mysteries? Rituals designed to elicit a response from the spirit world? Complicating the mystery further is the fact that most of these references are fragmentary: slivers of silk, eroded bamboo slips, half-preserved inscriptions on lacquerware. We can only glimpse the whole, but the atmosphere they evoke is unmistakable. A candle flickers inside a sealed tomb. Figures robed in feathers chant softly. Instruments begin to play. Somewhere, beyond the reach of eyes, a spirit listens. In recent years, researchers have attempted to reconstruct what these burial songs might have sounded like, combining ancient scales with the surviving lyrics and performing them using replicas of Chu instruments. The results are haunting: droning flutes, plucked strings, bells that chime like rain over stone. Still, we don't know if these reconstructions are accurate, or even close. The original compositions were never meant for ears of the living. They were lullabies for the dead, songs written to be carried by wind and soil, to guide the soul along invisible currents. And that may be the point. The Chu burial songs were never designed to be remembered by us. They were crafted for another audience entirely. For ancestors, for deities, for the unknown. So what, then, do we make of these ghostly verses? Are they remnants of a spiritual science we've long forgotten? Echoes of a shamanic past drowned beneath layers of imperial order? Or simply songs of grief, human, poetic, and universal? Perhaps the answer lies not in the words or the notes, but in the silence between them. In tombs now empty, music once filled the air. The question that remains: where did that music go? And more mysteriously still, is someone somewhere still listening?